Hello guys, this is Dark Fox Sage 2 and we are back with our new fanfic, which is what if Naruto was in a hitlist of Anbu and fell in love with 1010 part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfiction. For most people, their birthday is a day to celebrate. This was not the case for one boy in Konohagakure, because even though October 10th dawned with not a cloud in the sky, Uzumaki Naruto hated that day. He hated the day, because he himself was reviled throughout the village. In the 6 years he'd been alive, not once had anyone said a kind word to him, and on his birthday, the only gift he could hope for was to survive the beatings the villagers inflicted on him. Naruto ran, his lungs burning from the exertion, and found himself in a dead-end alley behind a bar. Oh, man, I'm screwed this time. There are shinobi in the mob this year, I don't wanna die. No one saw the old man walk out of the bar, nor did they mark the leather cases he carried slung across his back. But the man, seeing the crowd in the alley and hearing the curses flung to the unseen target of the mob's rage, he stepped closer. It was then that he saw a man at the front of the mob draw a knife and advance on a defenseless child. Naruto watched as the first villager drew a kitchen knife and moved to attack. Naruto, resigning himself to his inevitable demise, closed his eyes and waited for the stroke to fall. But fall it did not. There came a sharp crack, and Naruto opened his eyes to see the villager upon the ground, a ragged hole in his chest, and the mob parted to reveal an old man in a long coat, holding a weapon such as Naruto had never seen. The man strode forward and stepped between Naruto and the villagers. His voice carried an odd accent when he addressed the crowd. You know, it takes a real man to gang up on a defenseless child. You call yourselves ninja, I call you cowards and bullies. If anyone else wants to try for the boy, they'll have to brace me first. A villager yelled, What boy? That's a demon. He's a danger to this village, and we'd be doing a service to be rid of it. A chorus of agreements rose from the mob, and the stranger's eyes grew cold and hard. All I see is a young boy, being hounded by drunken fools and cowards, who have to beat on someone weaker than them in order to feel like men. You should all be ashamed of yourselves. Now move out of my way. The crowd moved under the stranger's murderous glare, and he picked up Naruto, who by this point had passed out from exhaustion, and carried him to the Hokage tower. When Naruto awoke, he was lying, not in the alley like he'd suspected he'd be, but on the Hokage's office couch. Gigi-san, what happened? The Hokage answered, You were nearly killed, Naruto. You passed out, from exerting yourself so much to try and escape the mob. This man, James-san, rescued you and brought you here. The stranger from the alley touched 2 fingers to the broad brim of his hat, and said nothing. The Hokage continued, He has also offered an idea to me, which I would like to put before you. The man, now identified as James, put his hand upon the Hokage's shoulder. Perhaps, Sarutobi-sama, I should explain. He turned to Naruto and looked him squarely in the eye. You see, I'm an exile from my own land, far to the west of here. I'm also somewhat of a master, in the usage of a unique type of weapon, and I offer you the choice, Naruto, to either stay here, if you'd like, or travel with me, and learn my weapons as my apprentice. I promised Sarutobi-sama that I'd have you back in time to take the Genin exam when you turn 12. Naruto's face lit up. Unique. As in, very few people from here know it. James smiled, his eyes twinkling. No one here besides me, you, and the Hokage, know my weapons. Ogigi-san, could I please go with James Neeson and train? Please. Sarutobi merely smiled, and went behind his desk to the bookshelf, pulling some scrolls out before handing them to Naruto. These are manuals on the basics of chakra control, ninjutsu, genjutsu, and taijutsu. You'll need to study them, as well as James-san's weapons, if you want to become a shinobi. Your things are already packed and waiting outside the office. Sarutobi knelt down, and gave Naruto a hug. Take care, Naruto. I look forward to seeing you as Hokage. That afternoon, Naruto set out with James, to train and move one step closer to becoming the next Hokage. As Naruto and James walked down the road, heading deeper into the forest which gave the village hidden among the leaves its name, the old man began to speak. Naruto, just for the record, James isn't my family name. It's my given name, and you don't have to add any suffixes or honorifics to it. Just call me James. If you follow my instructions, and pay attention to what I'll teach, you and me will get along just fine. The boy beamed. Okay, James, what's my first lesson? James just pointed them down a road that led to a nearby trading town, and said, first lesson is a dual one, both common sense, and fashion sense. We're getting you some proper trail clothes, preferably something that isn't brilliant, shoot me, orange. But I like orange, whined Naruto, only to cut his next sentence off when he saw the reproving look on his sensei's face. True, I can tell you like the color. You don't have to give it up completely, just don't wear as much of it. The weapons I use rely on not only speed, but also steadiness of hand and eye, and a fair amount of stealth. Orange stands out, unless you're trying to disguise yourself as a pumpkin. I see, said Naruto. He grew quiet for a moment, then looked back at James. James, what exactly is your weapon? James stopped, reached into his coat's inside pocket, and pulled out a shorter version of the weapon he'd used in the alley. It had the same wooden grip, the same metal frame, and the same pair of moving arms, one just above the grip, and one on the bottom of the frame, just in front of the grip. Inside the frame was a metal cylinder, and in front of the cylinder a hollow metal tube, of just about 3 inches length. This is as good a starting weapon as any, I suppose. It's called a firearm, Naruto. More specifically, a revolver, or pistol. In my homeland, most simply call this and my other firearms guns. He handed the revolver to Naruto, and told him to put it in his jacket pocket, and not to mess with it until he was told to do so. 3 hours later the duo reached the town, a little collection of rip-sawed board buildings and thatch-roofed huts called Yumi. James led Naruto to a tailor's shop. Naruto, I won't always be around to tell you what to do, so you'll have to learn how to make decisions on your own. So, as a starting lesson on that, here is enough money to buy 3 or 4 good sets of clothes. I won't tell you what to buy, but I will offer a few suggestions. First, make sure it's durable. Denim or leather work, and cotton is light and breathable, so you won't overheat. Second, as I said earlier, using guns takes a fair degree of stealth, so orange in large amounts, or any bright color for that matter, is not advisable. Earthy colors, like browns and greens work well. Black also works. Now head on in there. If you need me, I'll be here in town. James then strolled away into the heart of town, leaving Naruto there outside the tailor's. 2 hours later, James returned to the tailor's shop to find Naruto sitting outside, dressed in his new outfit. Gone was the orange jumpsuit, and in its place was a pair of canvas cargo pants, an olive drab tee, and a black denim jacket. Tied around his neck, Naruto wore an orange bandana. Did I do well? Asked the boy. You did fine, Naruto. Now let's head out of town a while, and I'll start teaching you how to use that gun in your pocket. The two went to a clearing on the outskirts of Yumi, and James found a suitable log to use as a target stand. He set 5 empty sake bottles down on the log, and returned to Naruto. Naruto, pull out your gun. The boy did, and James explained how it worked. This is a Colt's pocket Navy revolver, the concealed carry version of the Navy Colt I carry in my sash. It operates like so. He took the handgun from Naruto, and held it with the open ends of the cylinder facing upwards. You pour a small measure of black powder into 5 of the chambers. Then, you place a small paper patch over the end of the chamber, then the projectile on top of that. James reached into his pocket and pulled out a small lead ball. This is the projectile, known as the pistol ball, or bullet. Once you put the ball onto the patch, you press a little bit to seat it, and use the loading lever here under the barrel, to ram it home against the powder charge. James demonstrated each step as he explained it, while Naruto looked on in rapt attention. The last step in preparing the weapon is to cap the nipples on the opposite end of the cylinder. You take this, said James, holding up a percussion cap, and seat it firmly on the nipple here. This process is called loading. Naruto nodded his understanding and loaded 4 more chambers so he could learn how to use the pistol in combat. Naruto was about to load the 6th and final chamber in the cylinder when James stopped him. No, Naruto. Always leave one cylinder empty, as a safety. But why, James? James explained how, if one were to drop his revolver by accident, the impact could cause the hammer to strike the cap for the chamber under the hammer at the time. If that chamber were loaded, the gun would go off, possibly injuring or killing someone. So the revolver was always carried with an empty chamber under the hammer. Weeks passed, and each day Naruto learned more and more. He studied and practiced the contents of the scrolls that the Hokage had given him, and though his chakra control was horrible, he swiftly mastered Kawarimi and Henge. He also started learning how to track, how to hunt, from James, how to survive in the wilderness and live off the land. Naruto learned swiftly the 4 main rules of gun safety. 1. Treat every gun, even one you know for a fact isn't loaded, as if it were. 2. Never, ever, point a gun at something or someone you don't intend to kill. 3. Always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. 4. Never draw a gun unless you plan to use it, and never use it unless you plan to kill with it. Naruto quickly learned the pistol to a satisfactory degree, and moved on to other guns. He learned the destructive close-range power of the shotgun, and the speed of the repeating rifle. He learned the unflinching patience of the marksman's art, when he was trained to fire the big sharp single-shot rifle. His body grew strong, as James always bought bar lead in town, so as to make their own bullets, and it fell to Naruto to carry it. The net effect was that they acted as improvised training weights. Naruto also grew taller, though not by much, and gained muscle mass and tone. He grew fast, often having quick draw contests or foot races against his sensei to determine who got the last bowl of soup, or who got the best cut of meat from the game they hunted. It didn't take long before Naruto was the faster runner, but it took 2 years for Naruto to finally best James in a quick draw. James often marveled at the kid. He learned fast, and despite the blockhead image, Naruto was actually fairly smart. He was a natural, taking to the gun like he was born to it. He healed so swiftly, that his wounds, his bruises and cuts and scrapes, never took more than a week to heal at most. James was in awe of this child, and watched with fatherly pride as Naruto grew stronger, and smarter, and faster. But all good things must come to an end, and in this case, that end came on Naruto's 12th birthday. James and Naruto had been on the road back to Konoha for a week or more, making their way toward Naruto's date with the Genin exams. They were both tired, sore and stiff, and covered head to foot in trail dust, but they found the time to make camp, pull out a small stewpot and a Dutch oven, and James made not only beef and chili ramen, but also a fresh apple pie for Naruto's birthday. Naruto loved apple pie, but he despised the taste of the dried apples that they often carried with their supplies. Naruto would often joke to James about it by quoting an old rhyme. "You can spit in my ears, and tell me lies, but don't try and feed me those dried apple pies." Out of the forest stepped a man, dressed in a black cloak with red clouds upon it, and a wide straw hat that shadowed most of his face. He wore a Konoha headband with a slash through it on his forehead, light occasionally gleaming off of it. "Are you the one they call Shootist?" James stood, facing the man, who sounded as if he were not long out of his teenage years. "I am, though it is considered polite to introduce yourself before asking questions. My name is not important. All that matters is what happens now, Shootist," stated the man calmly. The man's right hand dropped to his leg, where he shifted the cloak back to uncover the kunai pouch on his thigh. My apologies, old man. Both men moved as one, so fast that Naruto had no time to react. James drew his navy Colt and fired it as he dove to the left to avoid a thrown kunai. His pistol ball grazed the man's cheek, leaving a burnt marking across it. The man never made a peep, just kept moving and throwing, even as James returned fire with his revolver. Naruto watched in awe as James fired, each shot so assured to be on target, yet each shot missed by a narrow margin, inches in some cases. Finally, James's gun clicked empty. The man shifted and threw another kunai, striking James in the chest and penetrating deep. James slid limply to the ground as the man cut a strand of his hair and left. As he left, Naruto saw the man's eyes. They were bright blood red. Naruto rushed to James's side and started to pull out bandages when James stopped him. No, Naruto. I'm a goner no matter what. Before I go out, though, I want you to know a couple things. First, everything of mine is now yours. My guns included. Second, I want you to remember my whole name. My name is Hickok. James Butler Hickok. Save your strength, James. You can't die. Didn't you always tell me that you were too damned mean to die? Huh. Naruto was on the verge of tears, still futilely trying to stop the bleeding from his sensei's chest. Easy, Naruto. One last thing. I want you to know that I'm proud of you. You've learned well, and you're a truly amazing student and friend. Now go, Naruto, and take your stuff with you. You have an exam to take. James drew his navy Colt from his sash, pressed the butt of it into Naruto's hand, and with a last, contented sigh, James Hickok passed away. Naruto arrived at the gates of Konoha 3 weeks later. The Chunin at the gate stopped him. Business in Konoha. I'm here to see the Hokage. Do you have an appointment? No, but I'm an old friend of his. Just tell him that James-san's apprentice is back. The Chunin looked skeptical, but dispatched his partner to relay the message. The man came back a minute later, looking as if he'd seen a ghost. The first Chunin turned to him. Yama, what's wrong? You don't realize who that is, standing there, do you? What that is? I see a boy of 12. Naruto, listening to this conversation, decided to make his presence a little more known. He cleared his throat to get their attention. Could I go now? Yes, go, please. Naruto took off toward the Hokage Tower. When he arrived, Sarutobi was sitting in his office working on the mountains of paperwork that seemed to just appear every day. He was thinking of Naruto and wondering when the boy would come bursting through his door. He didn't have to wait long. Hi, Gigi-san. Did you miss me? The blonde walked into the room and immediately threw Sarutobi into a bone-crushing hug. I did, Naruto. I assume that you've trained hard, over the past 6 years. I worked my tail off. Naruto cut himself off, his eyes glazing over, and he stood there, silent. Hokage-sama. This surprised Sarutobi above all else. Never had Naruto addressed him as Hokage-sama before. Hokage-sama, I hate to have to tell you, but 3 weeks ago James died. We were attacked by a ninja with a Konoha headband. James put up a good fight, but he was killed. Sarutobi's face fell, and his eyes grew sad. I'm sorry to hear that, Naruto. He hugged the boy, trying to comfort him over the loss of one of the only people who'd actually cared for him. Your apartment is still here, I kept the lease up for you. The Genin exam is tomorrow. Naruto turned and walked out of the office, headed back to his old apartment. Along the way, Naruto decided to stop in at a weapons shop and place a special order. The girl running the store came out and looked him up and down. Can I help you, sir? Naruto smiled. I need to place a special order. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a circular disc of sheet metal, with notches along the edge to hold cartridges and a hole in the center for the cylinder pin. It was called a moon clip. I need 100 of these. The metal doesn't have to be the best, just whatever works. Can you do it? The girl smiled. Of course I can get it done. So, if I might ask, what's the need for these little discs? They're obviously too dull to use as shuriken. 3 weeks prior, Naruto had sat down upon a log by the roadside, and looked at the pile of earth and stone that marked James's grave. He looked then to the pack that James had carried, and the leather cases that he knew contained the Sharps, the Henry, and the Parker. Naruto opened the pack and was surprised to see a pair of scrolls fall out. He picked up one and opened it, revealing a letter written in James's neat, precise hand. Naruto, if you're reading this, then I've probably been killed and left you out there by your lonesome. For that, I would like to apologize. Before this letter cuts out, I want to say a few things that I probably didn't get a chance to tell you before I bought the farm. So sit down and listen, read, closely. 'Cause I ain't sayin' this much but once. First off, like I said, I'm sorry I had to go and die on you. But you and me both knew it would have to happen sooner or later. That's why most of your training was on how to survive better on your own. Secondly, I'd like to tell you that you've done me proud, not only as a student but also as a friend and traveling companion. There's not a thing more I could have taught you on firearms. So, with my probably sad demise, I pass on to you the title, Shootist. Bear it with pride, boy, it has meaning. A shootist is someone who's a professional with his guns, someone whose shooting has purpose. You're not just some punk gun hand, out to make money. You use your iron with not only pride, but also with intelligence and professionalism. You use these guns of mine, and the others that I bought and had sealed in the other scroll, to protect those folks you call precious. Same way I used my iron to protect you in that alley. Now, I'd best wrap up this letter before you start to ballin' and smear the ink. I wish you happy trails, Naruto. I'll see ya on the other side. James Butler Hickok. Naruto opened the other scroll and dumped chakra into the first seal on the page. In a puff of smoke appeared a large framed revolver, with a tag hanging from the trigger guard. Naruto read it aloud to himself. Smith & Wesson New Model 3 American Schofield Revolver, Cavalry Pattern, 7-inch barrel top break design, holds 6 cartridges, caliber .45 Schofield. He rapidly familiarized himself with this new pistol, and unsealed a holster and belt for it. Contained in the scroll were but 3 other guns, a Spencer 7-shot repeating carbine, a Colt single-action Army revolver, or Peacemaker, and a Colt Patterson cap and ball revolver, which James had said was the first revolver ever made. The scroll also contained ammunition for the weapons, and so Naruto hastily belted on the Schofield and the Peacemaker, sealed James's Navy Colts, and dropped the pocket Navy down into his inside coat pocket. It was with a heavy heart that he set out once more for Konoha. Hello. Are you alright? You spaced out on me for a second there. The girl was nervous. It's not every day that someone comes into the store, places a huge order for something that looks useless, and then zones out entirely when you ask why they need what they need. Naruto snapped out of his daze and looked at the girl. I'm sorry. I was remembering something. Come with me real quick and I'll show you why I need those. He walked outside, asked where a deserted training area was, and then followed the girl after she hung a sign on the shop's door saying it was closed for the lunch. When the duo arrived at the training ground, Naruto pulled out an empty moon clip. This a moon clip. He placed it on a stump, then reached into a pocket to dig out a .45 Schofield round. This is a cartridge. Next he swept the tail of his coat back, and drew the Schofield. This is one of my weapons. It's from the West, called a revolver. This one's a Schofield. How it works is like this. He enthusiastically explained how the moon clip solved the problem of speed reloading the Schofield, by having all 5 rounds together on one disc, which can be inserted into the cylinder as one, instead of having to reload 1 round at a time. He explained then how the revolver worked, and let her bang off a few rounds. As he prepared to go, the girl stopped him. My name's Ikegata Tenton. What's yours? Naruto grinned his foxish grin and replied, I'm Uzumaki Naruto, alias Naruto Hikage, shootist and future Hokage. Tenten smiled. Pleased to meet you, Naruto. I'll have your order done by Tuesday. Maybe you can show me some more of your guns. She laughed and ran back to the weapons store, leaving Naruto behind. Naruto went back to his apartment and made sure that each gun he owned was clean and in the best possible condition for the next day. He glanced at his clock, noticed the time, and went to sleep, James's old hat over his face. Naruto was awoken by his alarm going off. He smacked the snooze button on it and sat up. He was still fully clothed from the day before, and merely pulled his boots back on, belted on his gun belts, and made sure all of his guns were loaded. He pulled his slouch hat down low, reached into his pack, and pulled out a chunk of venison jerky to gnaw on for breakfast as he walked to the academy. The classroom was in chaos when he got there. The teacher was nowhere to be found, and the kids were running riot. Naruto said nothing and simply went to sit in the back row, away from the rest of the crowd. After 10 minutes, a man with a scar across his face and a Chunin vest entered the room and attempted to quiet them, with little success. Yumino Iruka was about to use the academy instructor's best friend, Jutsu, the demon head no jutsu, when from the back of the room erupted a brace of thunderous booms that immediately drew everyone's attention. Naruto stood at his seat, the Parker double-barreled 12-gauge shotgun in his hand, pointed to the ceiling. Shut up and let the man talk. The faster he gets done with this, the faster we all graduate. Naruto broke open the shotgun, caught his brass, and reloaded swiftly before sitting down and putting the shotgun back in its case. Whispers flew as each minute passed, people trying to figure out who the new guy was, what that thing was that had made the noise like an A-class ninjutsu, and why the new guy was there. Part of their questions were answered when silver-haired Mizuki-sensei poked his head out of the exam room and called for Uzumaki Naruto. The blonde boy stood and walked into the exam room. Iruka looked at him, surprised that the boy whose apparent demise 6 years prior was still celebrated every year by half the population, now stood before him. He quickly reined in his emotions. Your test is to create 3 clones using Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto started to sweat. Bunshin. Why Bunshin? I suck at Bunshin. Calm down, Naruto, calm down. It's no different than laying behind the sharps and taking aim. Deep, steady breaths, relax, natural point of aim, slow, steady, squeeze. Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto pumped chakra into the jutsu, but something went awry, and he managed to only produce 1 clone, if the sickly-looking, ghost-pale blob on the floor could even be called a clone. You fail. After the class was dismissed, Naruto sat sadly on the swing outside, his head hung low. Damn it, Naruto. You let James down. How in the world do you expect to become Hokage if you can't even pass the Genin exam? Naruto-kun. Naruto looked up to see the silver-haired examiner. What was his name? Oh yeah, Mizuki-sensei. I saw how hard you tried in there, and you only fell a few points short of actually passing. So, I have an alternative for you. It's not one that gets used very often. I give you a simulated mission, and you then are scored for it upon completion. Naruto looked at this smiling individual and thought to himself about James's old saying that if something looked too good to be true, then it probably was. But he'd give this guy the benefit of the doubt. For now. What's the mission, Mizuki-sensei? The teacher smiled, just a little darkly. You just have to sneak into the Hokage's office and remove a scroll. That night, Naruto sat outside the shed, in the training field atop the Hokage monument, furiously studying the scroll in his lap. He'd gotten into the Hokage's office easily, and made off with the forbidden scroll. Let's see, the first technique is, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Damn it. Why'd it have to be a Bunshin? That's my worst technique. Oh, well, nose to the grindstone, Naruto. He started to practice the jutsu in earnest. 2 hours later Naruto was propped up against a tree, resting before he moved on to the next jutsu in the scroll. He picked up the scroll and was about to open it when the examiner with the scar on his face, Iruka, came tearing into the clearing. About time, Iruka-sensei. I only managed to learn one jutsu, but I think that should be enough to pass. Iruka was dumbfounded. Pass? Yeah, pass the extra credit assignment Mizuki-sensei gave me, the simulated mission. Iruka was about to speak when he sensed a presence behind himself, and dove to knock Naruto out of the way of the hail of kunai that Mizuki, crouched in a tree on the edge of the clearing, had hurled at him. Naruto, said Mizuki, Naruto, give me the scroll. Iruka yelled from where he was ripping kunai out of himself, Naruto, take the scroll and run. Naruto, on the other hand, had frozen. He watched as Mizuki unstrapped a huge Fuma shuriken from his back and let fly at Naruto. For the second time in 6 years, Naruto watched as his death approached, paralyzed with fear. And for the second time in 6 years, his death didn't come. The next thing Naruto knew, he was on the ground on his back, and Iruka was on all fours over him, the Fuma shuriken embedded in his back. Naruto, go, run. Oh, come on, Iruka. You can quit pretending to like this kid, already. I know just as much as you do about the decree 12 years ago. Mizuki shouted from the tree. Naruto slid out from beneath Iruka. Decree? What decree? Mizuki smiled evilly. That was part of the decree, that everyone know about it except you, on penalty of death. Iruka was ghostly pale as he stared at Mizuki. Mizuki, no. Mizuki continued. Why do you think everyone in the village hates you? Why do you think you have no family? Why are you always alone? 12 years ago, the Yondaime Hokage didn't kill the Kyuubi no Kitsune, he sealed it into an infant. That infant is you. You are the demon fox. Even noble Iruka here hates you. Iruka shrieked. No, at the same time Naruto sprinted into the forest. When Naruto finally came to a stop, he was out of breath, and leaning against a tree. He nearly bolted again when he heard 2 people crash into the clearing behind him. He heard Mizuki talking. Admit it, Iruka, you do hate the fox. You and I are the same in that. Iruka's voice came back in response. I'll admit, I do hate the fox. Naruto was about to cry at that. But not the boy. The boy, I have nothing but respect for. You can tell he works hard, and that he has a kind heart. He's no demon, merely a demon's jailer. Mizuki reached behind him for the second Fuma shuriken. Then you're expendable. Now die. He leapt for Iruka, but was stopped in his tracks by a sharp crack and the shuriken flying out of his hand and up into the treetops. Mizuki looked up to see Naruto standing at the edge of the clearing, a strange metal tube similar to the one he'd used that morning to silence the class, held to his shoulder. Mizuki-tem, you snake, if you lay another hand on Iruka-sensei, I swear to God I'll kill you. And that's not a threat. That's a promise. As if for emphasis, Naruto worked a lever on the underside of the weapon. Mizuki laughed. You, kill me. I'm a Chunin, and you haven't even graduated from the academy. I'll kill you, demon. Naruto simply pulled the trigger on his Henry repeating rifle, and blew out Mizuki's left knee, followed by a quick follow-up shot to the right one. As Mizuki writhed on the ground, Naruto turned to Iruka. Iruka-sensei, what Mizuki was trying to do constitutes treason, right? He was answered with a quick nod. And the penalty for treason's death, right? Once more a nod. Then I'll save Oji-san the trouble. Naruto slid the Henry under his arm, made a hand sign, and yelled a technique. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 8 Narutos appeared, 2 moving to grab Mizuki and tie him upright to a tree before dispersing. Naruto and the remaining clones each pulled out a Henry and stood on line with each other. Mizuki, you not only played me for a fool, you betrayed this village, and worse yet, you attempted to kill a ninja of the leaf. I refuse to say, fellow ninja of the leaf, because that would be giving you a title you don't deserve. The punishment for these is death. Ready. Mizuki and Iruka looked on in horror as Naruto and his clones worked the levers on their weapons in unison. Aim. The weapons came up as one. Fire. The report of the rifles was sharp and crisp, and Mizuki died. The clones dispersed, and Naruto went to Iruka. Are you alright, Iruka-sensei? I'll live, Naruto. Do me a favor and close your eyes. Naruto complied, and felt his hat being removed, and replaced by something. Now open them. Naruto opened his eyes to see Iruka standing there without a headband, and Naruto's hat in his hand. Congratulations, graduate. You pass. The next day dawned bright, and Naruto headed off to the academy with his head held high and his new Hitlist around his neck. He'd taken the plate off of the headband the night before and affixed it to his orange bandana. He barely saw the looks of disgust that people threw at him, and cared not one bit. For that day was the first day of his ninja career, the first stepping stone to becoming the Hokage. He arrived at the academy and sat down, pulling out his Henry and his cleaning gear. As he punched the bore, one of the other genin looked at him. What are you doing here? This is just for the people who passed. I did pass, actually. See the hit I ate. The boy, Shikamaru, left him alone after that, all the while muttering about something being troublesome. Naruto resumed cleaning his rifle. Iruka walked into the room, gave a speech about new responsibilities for them as genin, and set about calling team assignments. Team 7, Uzumaki Naruto, Haruno Sakura, and Uchiha Sasuke. Your Junin sensei will be Hatake Kakashi. Team 8 is, and so it went, until finally Iruka dismissed them for lunch. Naruto found his teammates, the pink-haired Haruno, and the brooding Uchiha Sasuke, and introduced himself. Hey guys, I was thinking we could get some lunch together, you know, and get to know each other better. Wadea say. Sasuke replied curtly, no thank you. You'd only slow me down, Dobi. He stalked off, and Sakura made no reply to Naruto, only following Sasuke, stars in her eyes the whole time. Naruto simply shrugged and walked into town, headed to Ichiraku's. Along the way, he bumped into the girl from the weapon store, Tenten. Oh, hiya, Tenten. How've you been? Tenten smiled at him. I've been fine, thanks. So, Naruto, where are you headed? Naruto smiled back and replied, Ichiraku's, for lunch. Do you want to join me? I'd be delighted. Maybe you could tell me more about your guns. The two of them walked to Ichiraku's and sat down, ordering a bowl each, with Naruto's order having the added, and keep him coming, at the end. Tenten waited until they both had their orders before speaking. So, Naruto, you said last time we met that there were different kinds of guns. What other kinds are there? Naruto slurped his ramen down and pulled out his Schofield. This is my Schofield, like I showed you last time. He laid it on the counter in front of him before pulling out the Peacemaker. This is another revolver, called a single-action army, or Peacemaker. It's made by a different company than the Schofield. The Schofield is Smith & Wesson, while the Peacemaker is a Colt. Next out came the Pocket Navy. This is an earlier Colt design, called the Pocket Navy Revolver. It uses a different loading system than the Peacemaker. Both Colts were laid on the counter next to the Schofield. That's all my sidearms. I'll show you the rest when we're done here. I'll even let you fire them all. Naruto beamed when he saw the grin across Tenten's face. The kids finished their ramen and went back to the training ground where Naruto had explained the moon clip to Tenten, and Naruto pulled out his pocket navy. He, like James had done for him, demonstrated how to load the weapon, how to hold it and aim it, and how to fire. He then set up a row of clones using Cage Bunshin. Okay, Tenten, just aim at center mass, cock it, and squeeze the trigger. The little pocket pistol went off, startling Tenten, and the shot went wild over the clone's left shoulder. She steadied herself, sighted in once more, and the next time the pistol barked, the clone gasped at the hole in his sternum before vanishing in a puff of smoke. Good shot, Tenten. Naruto clapped her on the back, and they moved on to the other weapons Naruto had on him. Tenten learned how to use the Schofield and the Peacemaker, taking a strong liking to the Peacemaker, although it was slower to reload than the Schofield. Naruto, what's in the 3 cases on your back? My long arms. 2 rifles and a shotgun. He removed each weapon from its case and laid it in front of him. First, my shotgun. It's a Parker double-barrel 12-gauge. A shotgun has a large bore, which is smooth, as opposed to a pistol or rifle. It's meant for in-close work, like breaching doors or hunting birds or game. It also works wonders as a close-range combat weapon. It doesn't shoot a single bullet at you. It shoots a bunch of real small ones that scatter out wide and hit the target. For example, Naruto winged a large chunk of wood up into the air, pulled the shotgun to his shoulder, and fired once. The wood jerked in air, and landed covered in holes from the shot pellets. Next is my repeating rifle, an 1860 Henry. It, like all rifles, has these grooves in the bore. See how they spiral like that? They're called rifling, hence the name. They make the bullet spin, and it keeps it on target. It makes the bullet more accurate, and gives it better range. He signaled to the clones, and a few of them took off running. Naruto cut them down quickly and efficiently, from 200 to 300 yards. He then pulled out the Sharps. This is a Sharps .5090 rifle. The cartridge for it is a 50 caliber bullet propelled by 90 grains of black powder. This bad boy's only single shot, but it'll take down a target from just about any distance you choose. Throughout all of this, Tenten had been watching and listening in odd silence. The weapons nut in her was in utter heaven. She snapped out of her reverie when Naruto mentioned that the Sharps could hit any distance. No way. Naruto's response was to signal his clone, who dashed over, picked her up and slung her over his shoulder, and ran away from Naruto. When Naruto was a black speck in the distance, Tenten saw a white puff of smoke from Naruto's position, and a second later heard a hissing whine before the clone was blasted from beneath her. Tenten landed on her butt as the sound of the shot rolled over her. She stood and ran back. That was awesome, Naruto. I could hardly see you. Naruto grinned. My old sensei. He told me once about a battle where a man named Billy Dixon shot a person off of horseback at a little over 7/8 of a mile. After that, one of the nicknames for the Sharps was, the gun that shoots today and kills tomorrow. Naruto would have continued, however he glanced at his watch and noticed the time. Tenten, I've got to go, my lunch break is nearly over. Tenten smiled at him. Okay, Naruto, I guess I'll see you later, then. Naruto dashed off to the academy, arriving just as the clock above the door chimed the hour. Naruto's stomach rumbled again, so he dug into his war bag and pulled out another large chunk of jerky and a skinning knife, and sliced a piece off. Sakura was pretending to read a book, all the while staring at Sasuke, and said Uchiha was in a corner practicing a taijutsu kata. Naruto pulled his slouch hat down over his face and went to sleep. 2 hours later, Naruto was awakened by the sound of the classroom door sliding open. He lifted his hat brim and saw Kakashi walking in. The expression in the Junin's eyes was bored, and after mentioning that his first impression of them was that he disliked them, Kakashi instructed them to meet him on the roof. When they arrived on the roof, Kakashi bid them sit down, and directed his gaze to each of them in turn. Okay, I'd like for you to introduce yourselves, you know, likes, dislikes, dreams, etc. I'll go first. I'm Hatake Kakashi. My likes are none of your business, my dislikes I'd rather not talk of, and my dreams are my own. Now you, Pinky. Sakura bristled at the nickname, but continued. My name is Haruno Sakura. I like giggles and looks at Sasuke. I dislike Ino Pig competing for Sasuke-kun's attention, and my dreams are giggles again and looks at Sasuke, a trickle of blood running from her nose. Now you, duck ass. Sasuke grunted. I'm Uchiha Sasuke. I like very few things, dislike a great many things, and my goal is to kill a certain man. Sakura was in awe, it seemed, and was staring at Sasuke with no small amount of lust in her eyes. Then that makes two of us. Everyone turned to look at Naruto. I'm the shootist Uzumaki Naruto, alias Naruto Hickok. I like my weapons, ramen, and this girl I met at a weapons shop. I dislike hypocrites and cheats, and those who judge others before they get to know them. My two goals are to become Hokage so people will acknowledge me, and to kill the red-eyed man who murdered the first person besides the Hokage to treat me with any kindness. Sasuke scowled. Red eyes. Could it be him? Could it have been Itachi? Sasuke loosed a short, hoarse bark of a laugh. Like you could kill anyone, Dobi. Don't make me laugh. Naruto simply looked at Sasuke and smiled. Before Sasuke could blink, Naruto's hand whipped up from his coat and the Schofield in his hand bellowed. Sasuke's hand snapped to his ear where the bullet had burned it. How the hell did he move so fast? I never saw it. Like I could kill someone. Sasuke Tem. Just remember, I had you, and didn't take the shot. Let the bullet burn on your ear remind you. Naruto would have continued, but at that moment Sakura broke out of the shock of seeing Sasuke bleeding, and laid Naruto out with a haymaker punch to the temple. Kakashi, who had been watching all of this in amusement, cleared his throat to get their attention. Moving on, meet me at Training Ground 7, tomorrow morning. Don't eat breakfast if you don't want to throw it back up. We're having a survival test. But, Kakashi-sensei, we already did survival training in the academy. Kakashi smiled behind his mask. Ah, but this test determines whether or not you become genin. Before you talk, let me explain. The genin exam at the academy is to test to see if you have the capability to become genin. This test has a 66% rate of failure. Now go and rest up. You'll need it. With that, the masked Junin vanished in a swirl of leaves. Naruto returned to his apartment, cleaned his weapons, and then made his way up to the roof, only his gunbelt for armament, carrying the guitar he'd picked up years ago. James had given it to him, said that playing an instrument, along with being artistic, built dexterity in the fingers. Bout like shuffling cards, but without the hassle of drunken merchants trying to brace you. Naruto started to strum the guitar, and his voice, annoying when he yelled, mellowed to a smooth, rich tenor as he sang. I ride an old paint, I led an old Dan. I'm gone to Montana, for the throw the Houlihan. They feed in the coulees. They water in the draw. Their tails are all ratty. Their backs are all raw. Naruto didn't notice the petite figure looking at him from the alley below. Tenten had been coming from the shop to let Naruto know that they were closed, and she was thinking they might hang out, when she heard the singing. She listened to the second verse, more to the tune than the lyrics, which were something to do with a man with two daughters, whose wife had died in a brawl. It was when Naruto's voice took on a tinge of sadness, as if he were remembering someone dear to him, or longing for a faraway home, that she paid heed to the lyrics. When I die, take my saddle from the wall. Put it on my pony. Lead him out of his stall. Tie my bones to his back. Turn our faces to the west. And we'll ride the prairie. That we love the best. Ride around, little doggy. Ride around them slow. They're fiery and snuffy. And roarin' to go. Naruto sang the third verse of Old Paint, with the memories of James ever in the front of his mind. James had taught him the song, and others. He put the guitar down when he finished and looked out at the empty alleyway below him. Dawn found Naruto sitting at the base of a tree at the training ground, munching on a chunk of beef jerky and a hardtack biscuit while he waited. Sasuke arrived, followed closely by Sakura, a few minutes before the appointed time. Sakura noticed what Naruto was doing and raised an eyebrow. Naruto, you really want to puke? Naruto half grinned at her. I forgot. And besides, jerky and hardtack won't mess up a stomach like most grub. Want some? Surprisingly, Sasuke and Sakura were willing to share Naruto's food. They each took a little jerky and a hardtack biscuit. Kakashi arrived 2 hours later, only to be greeted by a scowling Sasuke, a shriek from Sakura, and a sleeping Naruto. Wake him up so we can start. Once Naruto was awake, Kakashi indicated a pair of bells on his belt. See these? All you have to do is get them by noon. If you don't get one, not only will I send you back to the academy, I'll tie you to a log and eat lunch in front of you. Naruto kept silent as Sakura asked about why there were 2 bells and 3 of them, guaranteeing that someone would flunk. When Kakashi set the timer and gave them the go, he bolted off into the woods, the better to figure out a plan. He settled on one swiftly, and created a shadow clone swiftly, dispatching it to its position to wait for the signal. Kakashi stood in the middle of the clearing, waiting, it seemed. Naruto stepped out of the brush, levered around into the chamber of the Henry, and yelled. Kakashi-sensei, I'm not going home without one of those bells. Kakashi chuckled a little, pulled out a small orange book, and began to read. Then don't expect to go home, Naruto. Naruto nearly lost it there. He calmly looked for his shadow clone, noted it was in position, and ran straight for Kakashi, firing from the hip as he went. Kakashi replaced his book as he attempted to dodge the bullets, some missing him by mere inches. He's not bad. I can't even read when I face him. But let's see how he does without his weapons. Kakashi created a shadow clone, used Kawarimi to swap with it, and appeared behind Naruto, swiftly removing the cases from Naruto's back, and the revolvers from Naruto's belt before vanishing into the forest. Naruto finally managed to hit Kakashi, only to have the man vanish in a puff of smoke, only a shadow clone. The Henry ran dry, and Naruto was stunned when he reached for his Schofield and found the holster empty. That thief. He took my guns. I'll show him. Naruto started tracking Kakashi, only to spot his Henry propped against a tree. 3 steps toward it led Naruto into a snare trap. The sensei watched in amusement as Naruto was jerked off his feet by the snare, but his chuckle was cut short by the shadow clone in his snare dispersing. Naruto, meanwhile, was back in the brush, thinking. There had to be a catch. 1-on-1, none of the genin stood a chance against a Junin, that was it. Naruto took off to find his teammates. He came upon Sakura trapped in a genjutsu, and muttering to herself about Sasuke. Naruto quickly snapped her out of it, checked his watch, told Sakura to follow him, and set out to find Sasuke. He didn't have to search long. Sasuke was resting after an abortive attempt at getting a bell. Naruto grabbed his wrist and yanked him deeper into the brush. What is it, Dobi? Spat the boy when he saw who it was. Listen, Sasuke, I've got it figured out, this exercise, I mean. You'd know what I'm talking about if you just gave it some thought. None of us, by ourselves, can survive against a Junin. Not Kakashi out there, our own sensei, and for sure not an enemy Junin out in the field. I can do it, Dobi. So long as you two quit holding me back, growled the Uchiha. Naruto's reply was to chuckle. You keep telling yourself that, Uchiha. But don't start believing it until after you're away from us. I don't want your arrogance getting me killed. Just think about it. Can one wolf kill a healthy water buffalo? No. Wolves don't hunt alone, anyway. They hunt in packs. That way, they have a greater chance of success. Naruto smiled as Sakura, and grudgingly, Sasuke, listened to him. Here's the plan. Kakashi was leaned against a tree, reaching for his book, when Sasuke bolted out of the trees, angling toward him, several kunai in hand. Sasuke threw the kunai, and Kakashi easily dodged them, only to be hit from the side by Naruto, a clip-point skinning knife in his grip, lashing out with brutal, ripping strokes of the blade. These, Kakashi parried, and as he was turning to drive the blonde back, Sakura dropped from the trees behind him and attacked with her own kunai. Whenever Kakashi would focus on one, the others would move in, darting away as he rounded on them. But they went in a pattern, and as Kakashi grew accustomed to the pattern, he felt comfortable in pulling out his copy of Ika Ika Paradise to read. Naruto had been waiting for this, and signaled the shadow clone he'd created when the exercise first started. The boom of the sharps going off didn't startle Kakashi. The big 50 caliber bullet tearing the book from his hand did, however. Kakashi dropped to his knees, just as the bell rang on the timer. Sakura and Sasuke stood holding the bells, and Naruto stood next to them. Time's up, and we have the bells. Do we pass? You pass. You saw underneath here, and realized that you had to work together, that the whole point was teamwork. Kakashi stood, wiping his eyes, and moved to stand next to a carved black stone. You see this stone? On it are the names of some of Konoha's greatest heroes. Naruto looked at the stone. He wanted to get his name on that stone. Then, no matter what, his thought was cut off by Kakashi continuing. These are all the Kia of our shinobi. These men, including some of my closest friends, all died in the line of duty. The man once more dried his eyes. We start missions tomorrow. Be here at 7. Dismissed. Naruto retrieved his guns from the hollow tree where Kakashi had put them, checked the chambers, and went to find some hunting. He was running low on provisions, and the shopkeepers here still overcharged him for bad merchandise, refusing to sell the good stuff. Flour and meal he could get, and milk, as well. He had to go into the woods and rob nests to get eggs that weren't cracked or rotten, though, and nobody would sell him meat that wasn't either rotten, or entirely gristle. The only restaurant that would serve him was Ichiraku's ramen, and even for the ramen-obsessed boy, the same meal wore thin every so often. So off he set to the forest, intent on killing at least some birds, or maybe a deer or boar. Nightfall saw Naruto returning from his hunt, his shirtsleeves spattered with gore, his pack loaded with the meat and hide of a boar he'd slain, and a half-dozen quail hanging from his belt. Naruto also carried, wrapped in some cloth for padding, the contents of every bird's nest he came across, to the tune of 3 crow, several hawk, and a handful of goose eggs. All in all, not a bad bag for the young hunter. Naruto, upon arriving at his apartment, set about tanning the hide, and drying the meat to preserve it. The days passed swiftly, each day bringing D-class after D-class missions for Team 7. From weeding gardens to walking dogs, to the dreaded mission of recapturing Tora, the pet cat of the fire daimyo's wife. Never in his life had Naruto been clawed up like that cat could. He looked like he'd lost a fight with a barber's razor, for crying out loud. Finally, one day in the mission's office, Naruto had enough. Why don't you give us something to do besides these shit jobs? He shouted for all to hear. Uruka, who was on duty in the office at the time, dutifully explained how the D-class missions were all they were qualified for at the moment, and then caught a look from both the Hokage and Kakashi. The scarred Chunin looked at the team, then at his mission roster. Well, if you really think you're up to it, I could give you this C-class mission. It shouldn't be too hard. All you have to do is escort a bridge builder back to his home country and protect him from bandits as he completes his latest bridge. All right. This was met by a unanimous affirmative from Team 7. Send in Tazuna. The shoji panel at the side of the room slid open, and in walked an old man, clutching half-drunkenly to a sake bottle. These runts are supposed to guard me. You must be kidding. The old man laughed and wobbled a little. Naruto fought to keep his temper in check. It wouldn't do to kill the person he was supposed to protect. Kakashi spoke, before anyone else could. You needn't worry, Tazuna-san. You only expect bandits, and even if the genin can't handle them, I'm a Junin, so I can deal with whatever arises. We depart tomorrow morning from the East Gate, so please be sober by then. You being intoxicated increases the risk of this mission unnecessarily. Team, go pack your equipment for a 2 to 3 week trip. And with that, the team departed each to his own abode to prepare. Naruto returned to his apartment, pulling out his leather warbag and putting together his kit. Into the bag went a large chunk of dried boar jerky wrapped in cloth, his skinning knife, a clip point of a design that James had called Bowie, and several boxes of ammunition for his weapons. He sealed the pocket navy into the scroll with his other weapons, and then proceeded to seal into the scroll some flour and meal, a canvas tarp, and a wool blanket for a bedroll. He also sealed some dry beans, spices, coffee, and a stewpot, Dutch oven, frying pan, and coffee pot into the scroll. Placing the rolled up scroll into the war bag with everything else, Naruto delved into his pantry, coming out with a cup of ramen, which he ate before going to bed. The next morning found Naruto waiting by the gate, just as the sun rose. Sakura was already there, looking bored. "Morning, Sakura," said Naruto as he pulled out a piece of cornbread and ate it. Sasuke arrived soon after, looked at Naruto with contempt, and sat down. Naruto merely pulled his hat brim low, and waited. Kakashi arrived 2 hours later with Tazuna, and after the now common, "You're late." From Sakura, they set out. After a few hours, Naruto noticed a pair of puddles ahead on the road. "That's odd. It hasn't rained in at least a week." Getting a bad feeling about it, Naruto swiftly undid the thong that held his Schofield in the holster at his hip. He was not a moment too soon, as once they had passed, a pair of ninja wearing breathing masks arose from the puddles, swiftly wrapping Kakashi, who had taken the trail position in the group, in a bladed chain suspended between wickedly clawed gauntlets each wore. With a swift jerk in opposite directions, the Junin was sliced to pieces. "One little piggy," growled one of the enemy ninja. The pair darted for Tazuna, only to be brought up short by Naruto as he kicked both of them in the face while drawing his Schofield. Naruto shouted to Sasuke, who had frozen for a moment. Sasuke threw a shuriken, pinning the bladed chain to a tree trunk. He reinforced the shuriken by throwing a kunai through the middle hole of it, further nailing the chain down. The enemy ninjas broke free of the chain and split up, one to either side. Naruto drew his knife, holding it left-handed. As one rushed him, he calmly brought up the revolver and fired, blood and gray matter erupting from the back of the oncoming ninja's head. Naruto wheeled just in time to see Sasuke freeze again, and the enemy ninja get clotheslined by none other than Kakashi. "Kakashi-sensei, you're alive." "Of course, Naruto. Did you think I'd die on you so easily?" The man gave what Naruto had come to call an "I" smile, and chuckled. "I think that this counts as more than a C-class mission, though." Rounding to face Tazuna, Kakashi spoke clearly and shortly, obviously not happy with the enemy ninja attacking them. "Tazuna-san, you requested protection from bandits. That's a C-class mission. These were missed ninja, of at least Chunin level. That's not a C-class mission, that's an A- class. My team has every right to terminate this mission here and now. Care to explain?" Tazuna tearfully explained how his country, the land of waves, was impoverished, due to the depredations of a crooked shipping magnate named Getu. Getu controlled the shipping in and out of the country. He also controlled the drug trade, the arms trade, and several other highly illegal ventures in Wave. Tazuna explained that the bridge he was working on would free Wave from Getu's clutches, and how the criminal had threatened him and others on the project with assassination. Tazuna went on to state that his family had enough money for a C-class escort, but not enough for an A- class. Kakashi looked to his charges. "Well, what do you think we should do?" Sasuke looked at the old man, and then to Kakashi. "I say we continue." Sakura naturally agreed with Sasuke. Naruto grinned a fox grin and spun the cylinder on his Schofield. "Deal me in on this one. I don't like seeing other people mistreated." Kakashi turned to Tazuna and told him that they would escort him back to Wave. So, the group began to move again. That night when they made camp, Naruto unsealed his stew pot and food. All cover supper. He started cutting up jerky, adding spices and flour and beans, until eventually he had a pot of chili ready, and a pan of cornbread to go with it. The others dug into it slowly, then wolfing it down as they discovered that it was neither ramen, nor poisonous. They mopped up the broth from the chili using slices of the cornbread, and washed it down with water from their canteens or coffee from Naruto's pot. So, Guys, what do you think? Not bad, Dobi, said Sasuke before he walked off. A little spicy for me, but it was actually pretty good, seconded Sakura as she went back for seconds. Kakashi gave Naruto the thumbs up and went for his own plate of seconds. Naruto poured himself another cup of coffee and pulled out his revolver, breaking it swiftly down in his lap and cleaning it. He reassembled the pistol, put it back in the holster, and lay down to sleep. Sleep would not come easily, however. Naruto tossed and turned, nightmares plaguing him, until he finally sat up. Sakura was on guard, leaning against a tree, looking almost dead to the world as she visibly fought sleep. Naruto warmed the coffee over the coals of the fire, and poured a pair of cups. To one he added plenty of sugar, and went over to Sakura. Here, Sakura, I added sugar to it, so it shouldn't be too bitter. Sakura started when she heard his voice, and then took the coffee. Thank you, Naruto. Why aren't you sleeping? She looked genuinely concerned, and Naruto explained that he just couldn't sleep. He'd leave out the nightmare part. Sakura didn't buy it. I've seen you sleep in some of the weirdest places known to man, Naruto. You could sleep anywhere. Okay, Sakura. Truth is, I had a nightmare. I had them pretty often as a small kid, but they tapered off after I left on my apprenticeship. They came back tonight, I suppose, because being out here on the trail reminded me of being with James again. I'll be fine in the morning, though. Why am I spilling my guts to this girl? Naruto was confused. Sakura's face softened further. James must have been a really nice guy to take you in, Naruto. How long were you two together? If you don't mind me asking. Naruto smirked sardonically. 6 years. He was a father to me, the first person besides the old man to see me as human. He actually trained me. All these weapons, all these skills you see me with, aside from jutsu. All taught by James in his school of hard knocks. Naruto blinked back a tear at the memory. You said James was the first person to treat you with kindness besides the Hokage. By any chance, is he the one you swore revenge for? Naruto nodded. I see. She quickly changed the subject. So, Naruto, you fancy any girls back in Konoha? Naruto nearly choked on his coffee. What? What kind of question is that? Well, I do kinda like Tenten, but she probably doesn't want to go out with me. I mean, she's really classy, and I'm just the village demon. Sakura watched as Naruto's face lit up, then fell suddenly. What's with the long face, Naruto? You ask someone and they turn you down. No, Sakura. There is a girl I kinda like, but she wouldn't want to go out with me. She's got class, and I'm not exactly well liked by many people back there, you know. Sakura frowned. Well, it can't hurt to try, can it? Get her a gift, something she'll definitely like, and give it to her when we get back. By now, the sun had started to rise, and with it the rest of the camp. Sakura looked at Naruto, who was smiling at her. By the way, Naruto. Our conversation all night, it changes nothing between us. I still think you're annoying and dense, just not quite as much as before. Naruto just smirked and replied. And I still think you're obsessed with a bastard with a stick up his ass, who will probably never acknowledge the existence of another person aside from himself. But I don't think you're annoying anymore. Naruto walked off to pack up his bedroll and kit. Later that afternoon, Naruto was thinking of nothing, attempting to sleepwalk, when he caught movement from the corner of his eye. He instinctively drew and fired, then dove into the bushes, coming out with a very stunned white rabbit. Just as the thought entered Naruto's head as to why in the middle of summer did this rabbit have a winter coat, a dense fog rolled in. Naruto released the rabbit, and was making his way back to the group when Kakashi yelled to get down. Naruto and the others hit the deck, watching as a giant sword whirled through the air and embedded itself in the trunk of a tree. From the fog appeared a shirtless man in blue pinstripe trousers, his mist headband turned to one side and the lower half of his face wrapped in bandages. Kakashi stepped forward. Well, Momochi Zabuza, the demon of the hidden mist. Kids, stay out of this fight. Zabuza's on a whole other level. Kakashi the copycat ninja. Zabuza stepped down from his perch on the sword grip and yanked the blade free of the tree. I'd love to kill you, but I'm here for the old man. Hand him over and you and your runts don't have to die. He's under our protection. We can't let you have him, calmly replied Kakashi as he tugged his Hittite up from over his left eye. It revealed an eye of blood red, with two comma-shaped dots revolving around the pupil. And I'm prepared to fight, to protect him. Zabuza stepped back a moment. The fabled Sharingan, he exclaimed in mocking surprise. It's an honor to see it so early in the battle. And with a swift hand sign, the mist thickened, obscuring everyone's view. Then, the man's voice seemed to echo from everywhere, talking about the 8 vital targets of the human body, and wondering aloud which he would choose for whom. Naruto, not trusting his ability to aim by sound, drew his shotgun from its case and thumbed both of the rabbit ear hammers back. All at once, Zabuza appeared in the midst of the group of genin, sword ready to swing. Naruto, relieved to actually see his target for once, pulled one of the twin triggers of his Parker. The 12-gauge roared, and the load of double-aught buckshot cut the water clone in two at the waist. Naruto turned in time to see Kakashi, engaged with another Zabuza, land in the nearby water, only to be trapped by the real Zabuza in a water prison. Kakashi watched in horror as the mist swordsman created another water clone, directing it toward the genin and Tazuna. Run! He cried out. This battle was lost as soon as I was captured. Go, and take Tazuna with you, yelled Kakashi, only to receive a very obscene gesture from Naruto. I won't run, yelled Naruto. I don't leave my parts behind. I've already lost one friend, I refuse to lose another. Naruto sprinted forward, jerked the other trigger on his shotgun, blowing away the water clone, then leapt into the air, intending to butt-stroke Zabuza, only to be swatted away by the mist ninja. Upon landing, Naruto was aghast to see his Hittite, lying just in front of Zabuza's foot. What's your name? Asked Zabuza. You, with the weird weapon. Uzumaki Naruto Hikok. Shootist and future Hokage, snarled Naruto. Zabuza's response was to laugh. You, Hokage. You little punk, you don't have nearly enough blood on your hands to become Hokage. Not even enough to call yourself a ninja. Me, I was elbows deep in blood before I even entered the academy. Kakashi proceeded to explain how years ago Hidden Mist, known as Bloody Mist, had been forced to change their barbaric graduation exam of forcing classmates to fight to the death, after a child, not even a student at the academy, had slaughtered that year's entire graduating class. Zabuza smiled. Ah, good times, and with that he ground Naruto's Hittite into the dirt. Naruto drew his revolvers. Fill your hand, you son of a bitch. And with that he sprinted once more toward Zabuza, firing as he went. The bullets were wide, kicking up dust in front of and behind the man, or flying off wild to one side or the other, and Naruto was repelled again by a hard kick to the chest. However, to strike Zabuza was never his goal. Naruto stood proudly as he tied the bandana with his Hittite plate on it back around his neck. Mark my words, Momochi Zabuza. I will become the next Hokage. I swear it on my honor as a Konoha shinobi, and I swear it on my title as shootist. Naruto quickly reloaded and reholstered his pistols, then reloaded his shotgun and recased it. Without a further word, Naruto created an army of shadow clones who drew skinning knives and rushed Zabuza. Zabuza easily dispatched them, revealing Sasuke whirling a large demon windmill shuriken, before heaving it directly at Zabuza. The demon of the mist blocked the incoming missile, only to reveal a second shuriken in its shadow. This Zabuza jumped over. The dodged shuriken disappeared in a puff of smoke, revealing Naruto, his Schofield in hand. Naruto fired, but his aim was thrown off by his landing, and instead of slamming into Zabuza's upper back or shoulder, the bullet burned his arm, forcing him to release the water prison. Naruto swam back to shore, and as he crawled out onto the bank, Kakashi was already forcing Zabuza onto the defensive. My eye can see the future, Zabuza. Are you ready to die? Asked Kakashi as he prepared to finish Zabuza. He was unable to administer the coup de grace, however, when a pair of Senbon thudded deeply into the missing Nin's neck, and he went limp. Above the battleground in a tree crouched a slight figure, face obscured by a mist hunter Nin mask. Thank you for weakening him for me. I've been tracking him for weeks now. The hunter, who could not have been much older than Naruto or any of the other genin, jumped down. I'll be taking his body now. Too many secrets he can still tell. The hunter leapt away into the trees, and Kakashi collapsed. That night, after arriving at Tazuna's house, Naruto and the others were invited to eat dinner with Tazuna, his daughter, Tsunami, and her son, the little boy, Inari. Kakashi had awoken an hour before supper, with the realization that they'd been duped. Hunter Nin, upon killing their target, were to take only the head back, and dispose of the body on site. Combine that with the hunter's use of Senbon, acupuncture needles, with which it is very hard to kill someone, but very easy to make someone look dead, and it was obvious that the mist hunter was Zabuza's partner or accomplice. Naruto sat at the table, wolfing down everything in sight, when Inari spoke. I don't know why you guys are even trying. You'll just die like the rest of the people who stand up to Gato. Naruto swallowed a mouthful of rice. I'm harder to kill than you'd think, kid. Inari stood up from the table and stormed off to his room. But not before saying something. You'll never be strong enough to beat Gato. Nobody can be that strong. Later that evening, Naruto walked up to Inari's door. He knocked, and the boy opened it. Hey, Inari, can you come with me for a second? I'd like to talk to you for a bit outside. Sure, replied the boy in a bored tone, and he followed Naruto out to the edge of the forest. What is it you want to talk to me about? Naruto pulled off his coat and hung it on a bush. Listen, Inari. I don't know what happened back in the past that has you cowed like you are, but I do have a good piece of advice for you that someone once told me. Suck it up. You need to reach down and make sure you've got a pair, and suck it up. If you keep acting like you're cowed by Gato and his punks, then that's all you'll ever be. A damned coward. Naruto snarled this last part, his lip curling in distaste. Inari started to tear up. I watched Gato kill my father in front of everyone. My father was the strongest, bravest, kindest man in Wave. If he couldn't do it, what makes you think you can? And where do you get off, telling me to suck it up? You don't know what it's like not to have a dad. You've got one waiting back in your village for you. Naruto's eyes darkened. I never knew either of my parents. They abandoned me as a baby. I've been beaten, spat on, and mistreated by everyone my whole life. The only people who've ever treated me like a human being are the Hokage, the village leader, and James Butler Hickok, who raised me for 6 years and taught me everything I know and hold dear. And I've never been cowed by anyone. Inari was taken aback by Naruto's statement, but his anger soon returned. I am not cowed. I'm not a coward. Prove it. Alright, name a challenge. To prove my bravery. Naruto drew his peacemaker, and emptied it of all but one bullet. This is a revolver. It's one of my weapons. This is what it does. Naruto cocked it and fired into a nearby melon, which burst into several tiny pieces. Naruto then put one round back in it, after ejecting the empty. Your challenge is this. You pull this part here back to half cock, Naruto explained as he pointed out the hammer. Then, you spin this part as hard as you can. Naruto spun the cylinder once as a demonstration. You pull the first part back all the way, then put the end of it up to your temple, and pull this back to fire it. Naruto pointed to the hammer and trigger. 1 round out of 6. You have a 1 in 6 chance of blowing your own brains out. Slim odds, true, of you dying, but if you do, then oh, well. One less coward in the world. Naruto was grinning evilly as he held out the pistol. Inari looked scared for the barest breath of a moment, Then his face hardened and he took the revolver from Naruto. He put the hammer on half-cock, spun the cylinder, and then fully cocked the pistol before putting the muzzle directly to his temple. I'm no coward. And with that Inari pulled the trigger. Click. The peacemaker clicked on an empty chamber. Inari had squeezed his eyes closed and grimaced as he pulled the trigger, and when the weapon clicked, he nearly dropped it on the ground. Naruto reached out, took the revolver, and holstered it. He looked at Inari, who frankly looked happy to be alive, yet still defiant. You're no coward, Inari. Not many people got the grit to play Russian roulette. It takes someone who's not afraid, who's got no regrets, to do it sober, and with a straight face. You just remember tonight. You danced with the Shinigami and hawked a loogie in his face. Nobody can stand up to someone who'll play Russian roulette. Now you run on back to bed and rest up. Naruto smiled and patted the kid on the back before ushering him back to the house. Kakashi, who had been watching the whole time from the forest, gave an unseen eye smile when he saw Naruto pull the round that he'd pretended to put in the peacemaker, out of his pocket. The week progressed smoothly. Kakashi trained the team in tree climbing without hands, so as to build chakra control. As each passed, they were added to the rotation to guard the bridge. Despite the death threats and people on the construction crew quitting in 2s and 3s, the bridge neared completion. Naruto would train in the forest day in and day out, whenever he wasn't on duty guarding the bridge. It was during one of his times in the forest that Naruto found the cave. Found being the best way to put it. In actuality, he fell out of a tree he was climbing, hit hard on his back, and crashed down through the roof of an old cave. Naruto's gaze came to rest upon a skeleton, both its legs shattered and rusted kunai protruding from its ribcage. Damn, you went down hard, my friend. He moved closer, and felt his shoe contact something metal. Naruto reached down and found half buried in the dust the plate from an old Hittite. Tacky. What's a waterfall shinobi doing in wave? Naruto looked around, cutting what sign was left of how the shinobi had died. Naruto showed little respect for most people, but he respected warriors, and judging from the old damage from water jutsus and the scattered kunai and shuriken fragments with lightning country manufacturers' marks on them, this lone Taki nin had held off at least 2 Kumo nins for a decent bit of time. That, Naruto respected. Naruto sealed the bones into a scroll, intending to get out of the cave and bury them near a waterfall he'd come across earlier in the day. When Naruto picked up the Hittite plate, he felt something on the reverse side. Turning it over, Naruto saw a storage seal etched into the metal. I wonder what he stored in here, remarked the shootist to no one. He poured chakra into the seal, and in a gout of smoke appeared a large, battered, leather-bound scroll, a smaller scroll, and a long buckskin case similar to the ones he carried on his back. Naruto set the scrolls aside for a moment, and opened the case to reveal a flintlock rifle that looked like it had seen many a better day. Naruto propped it against the cave wall, and opened the small scroll. It was a letter, addressed to a girl in Taki. Dearest Yuko, I miss you, out here in the field. I know the baby will be born soon, and I promise to be there in time to welcome our son into the world. I know you think it's a girl, but I'll bet you it's a boy. This last mission was a success. I tracked down the missing nin from our village, with the help of an odd civilian. He carried one of the oddest weapons I'd ever seen. It was a long metal tube mounted in a wooden stock. You pour black powder into the tube behind a lead ball, and after a little other preparation, it will throw the lead ball with such speed you'd never see it, for distances that are unheard of in the village. I'll be bringing it back with me. The civilian, Ferguson, was killed in battle. Before he died he gave me the weapon, which he calls the Ferguson breech-loading rifle. I have to go, Yuko Haim. The 2 Kumo nins whom my target was meeting are trailing me now, and I may have to fight soon. With all my love, Mori. Naruto cried as he read. Poor Mori. He never got to see his kid born, or his girl ever again. Naruto picked up the rifle and cased it, then sealed the other scrolls before jumping up through the hole he'd made in the roof of the cave, emerging back into the brightly lit forest. A short sprint later, and Naruto stood beside a quiet stream that flowed from a spring-fed pool. There, Naruto used his bowie to dig a grave, wrapped the bones in a tarp, and said a few words as he filled the grave and laid large, smooth river rocks over the grave to keep the animals out of it. Naruto left, heading back to the house to clean up. The next day, as Naruto came off his shift guarding the bridge, he was stopped by Inari. Naruto-Nisan, could I ask you a favor? Sure. What is it, Inari? Ever since Inari had played Russian roulette, he'd become more outgoing, and had started to look up to Naruto a little. Naruto saw so much of himself in Inari that it scared him, so it was hard to be mad and stay mad at him. Naruto-Nisan, could you teach me how to fight? I want to be able to protect Mama and Grandpa if I have to. Could you teach me, please? Okay, Inari. Naruto swiftly taught Inari the basics of fighting with a blade, and the beginning of his style, learned from James. It was called Arkansoyer style, and relied on brutal offense and a distinctive backhand ripping, disemboweling swipe of the blade, which was held overhand, cutting edge up, a signature trait of Arkansoyer style. Inari and Naruto sparred all day, Naruto with his bowie, and Inari with a thick butcher's knife from his mother's kitchen. The boy was a quick study, and many times during the matches he'd do something unexpected and Naruto would applaud a well-performed strike as his superior speed let Naruto parry it. Naruto trained Inari for 2 days, before presenting the boy with a bowie, a copy that Naruto had a blacksmith in the village make of his own, and a scroll containing all the notes of Arkansoyer-style knife fighting he could think of, including a few made up on the spot katas. Inari vowed to practice every day and become stronger, and took to carrying the bowie on his belt everywhere he went. One day, a week after Naruto gave Inari his bowie, Inari was by the side of the house, splitting wood with a hatchet so he could feed the wood stove in the house, when he heard a crash from inside. Hatchet in hand, Inari rushed inside to find his mother in the hands of 2 men, swords hanging by their sides. Inari drew his bowie and stepped forward. Let my mom go. One of them shifted to see Inari. Really? Hey, Zori, we were only supposed to take one hostage, right? The other smiled. Yeah, we were. You want some cutting practice? Tsunami started thrashing, trying to get free. If you harm a hair on his head, I swear I'll bite through my own tongue and drown myself in my own blood. The samurai holding her cuffed her with the butt of his katana to knock her out and looked at Inari. Kill him, Waraji. Waraji charged, drawing his sword and bringing it around in a downward cut. Inari brought up the metal-hafted hatchet and blocked the strike, deflecting it to one side as he stepped in. Inari had gotten fast. One had to if they wanted to keep up with a ninja. Inari wasn't nearly fast enough to beat Naruto, but he was much faster than he looked, and Waraji the samurai paid the price for it. Inside the samurai's guard, Inari's knife flashed, and Waraji dropped his sword. Inari stepped back and watched as the samurai tried to push his entrails back in through the long gash that Inari had opened in his belly. Waraji collapsed and Inari prepared to face the other samurai, Zori. Zori was about to drop Tsunami and kill the boy when a clicking sound came from right behind him and something got pressed to the back of his head. Drop the woman, drop your sword, and step over near your partner, snarled Naruto. He'd been in the forest training, and came across a trail of sword-cut trees and a chopped-up boar, all of it leading toward Tazuna's house. Good job, Inari. You read ahead to the tomahawk section. Naruto prodded Zori next to Waraji's corpse and buffaloed him in the back of the head with his revolver barrel. Inari swiftly helped tie the unconscious samurai. No, Nisan, I just sorta reacted on that one. Well, good job. First kill's always the hardest. I hope this is your only kill. Listen, Inari, I'm leaving you in charge. Hold down the fort here. If they attacked here, then they're probably attacking the bridge, too. I gotta go and help my team. Take care, kid. And with that, Naruto dashed away to the bridge. At the bridge, things were not going well for Team 7. Sakura was guarding Tazuna, unable to see for the thick mist all about her. Sasuke was fighting against Zabuza's accomplice, Haku, and losing, trapped in the boy's ice mirrors. Slowly, but still losing. Kakashi and Zabuza were at a stalemate, neither able to land a fatal blow. It was into this melee that Naruto arrived, making his presence known by landing next to Sasuke. "You idiot!" yelled the Uchiha. "Now we're both trapped in here. Shows how much you know. Not much'll stand up to a 12 gauge. To prove his point, Naruto fired both barrels into an ice mirror. It had no effect. Naruto pulled out his sharps and tried that, firing at an image of Haku in a mirror. The mirror wasn't even dented, and Haku flashed from one ice mirror to another, throwing Senbon as he went. This pattern continued, Naruto firing at shadows and missing Haku, Sasuke attempting to use Kaden jutsus and kunai to hit the boy or break mirrors, until finally, Naruto slid one round into his peacemaker and drew his bowie. Last round, Sasuke. After this, I'm down to my knife and 2 kunai. Sasuke, winded, stared straight ahead, focusing on the image of Haku. I'm almost able to see him move. I just have to focus. There. Haku made his move and Sasuke threw a kunai. It barely missed Haku's leg, but still managed to make him break his stride for the barest breadth of a moment. Naruto, seeing Sasuke move, whirled and fired his pistol. The bullet took Haku in the side, a flesh wound but a painful one. Haku made it to the next mirror and checked his side. The Uchiha can see me now. How? Haku looked, and there in the boy's face spun a pair of Sharingan eyes. I have to end this now. In a blur, Haku rushed out of his ice mirror, a handful of Senbon at the ready in either hand. These Haku loosed at Naruto. Before Naruto could react, Sasuke was in front of him, taking the full brunt of Haku's deadly needles. Dobi. At this point several things happened in quick succession. A trickle of blood escaped the Uchiha's mouth. He fell to his knees, then face down onto the ground. Naruto checked the boy's pulse and found none. And all hell broke loose. Naruto screamed, his voice hoarse and bestial. His eyes, once brilliant blue, turned red, his pupils slitted and burning with hellish rage. He snarled and revealed fangs. His chakra flared, and where it had once been blue like his eyes, it was now red and malevolent. So powerful was this flare that it stopped Kakashi and Zabuza in their tracks. Naruto saw movement from Haku, as the boy tried to dash from one mirror to the next, and rushed, grabbing Haku by the ankle and throwing him through an ice mirror, then pounced on him as he landed. Haku's Hunter Nin mask went flying, to reveal a feminine face with tear-stained eyes. I'm sorry. I didn't want to kill anyone. But Zabuza-sama is precious to me, and I swore to protect him. I'm sorry that you lost one of your precious people. Haku steeled himself for his demise. Meanwhile, the battle between Kakashi and Zabuza was not going well for the Mist Swordsman. Kakashi had rendered both his arms useless, and his nin dogs had Zabuza pinned. Kakashi prepared to use his Raikiri, and charged, the jutsu crackling and chirping like the 1,000 birds that gave it its other name, Chidori. As Naruto leapt for Haku, intending to tear the boy's throat out barehanded, Haku vanished in a burst of speed. He reappeared between Kakashi and Zabuza, taking the Leaf Nin's attack cleanly through the heart. Kakashi lowered the boy's body to the ground and prepared to square off once more with Zabuza, when from the end of the bridge came clapping. There at the end of the bridge stood the author of all Waves' troubles, Gedu himself. He stood at the head of 100 thugs, all thirsting for blood. Well, Zabuza. Can't even stand up to a bunch of kids and their babysitter, can you? I think when you called yourself the Demon of the Mist, that was just plain false advertising. Of course, I never intended to pay you anyway. It's too expensive to hire ninja from a respected village, better to hire thugs and missing nin, then come in and clean up the survivors after the battle. The diminutive tyrant spotted Haku's body on the ground and walked over. You little bitch, you nearly broke my hand one time. Getu kicked the body as hard as he could, and Zabuza visibly flinched. Zabuza turned his head back to Kakashi. Well, Kakashi, it seems my mission's over. So it seems, Zabuza. Kakashi dismissed his nin dogs. He looked to where Sakura had rushed over to Sasuke, who had, true to Haku's statement of not wanting to kill anyone, only been in a near-death state. Zabuza looked at Naruto, who had calmed down. His eyes had turned blue again, and he was crying at Haku's death. Shootist. Can I borrow a blade? Zabuza bit through the bandages around his mouth. Naruto tossed a kunai to Zabuza, who caught it in his mouth. Go out with your boots on, Zabuza-san. Show him a real demon. Zabuza sprinted, his useless arms trailing limply behind him, his eyes wild, and barreled headlong into the middle of the crowd of mercenaries. Many weapons found him. Swords and spears, kusarigama, knives and others drew blood from him. But the kunai in Zabuza's mouth drew blood as well, laying open bellies and throats and arms, until finally, Zabuza was beyond the army and upon Getu. The kunai was buried deep in the criminal's chest, then withdrawn. Zabuza thrashed his head, and Getu was slain, his head bouncing upon the bridge. Zabuza collapsed, and at his request was placed next to Haku. There the great and ferocious demon of the mist passed on. One of the thugs spoke up. You killed our meal ticket. Now we're gonna have to plunder the whole village. His sentiment was echoed in the roar of his fellows. As the crowd started to surge forward, there came a roaring boom, and the lead man was stopped by a bullet kicking up dust next to his feet. Inari sat at the edge of the bridge, knocked flat by the recoil of the Ferguson that Naruto had left at Tazuna's house. Behind him stood the villagers, all ready to fight and defend their home. Inari stood, laying the rifle down and drawing his bowie. Leave here now. If you don't, we'll kill you all. Naruto grinned at the boy as he unsealed ammunition from his scroll and reloaded his Henry. He's got sand, that's for sure. Naruto frowned as the thugs prepared to continue, obviously intending to run right over the defenders. I suppose I should join in the party. Cage Bunshin. Naruto's appeared from edge to edge on the bridge, 4 ranks deep. The front rank lay down prone, while the second rank assumed a sitting position. The third rank was at a high kneeling, and the fourth stood. Each rank raised their Henrys and chambered rounds. The real Naruto stood right flank, front. Do you want to die? If you don't, then turn around now and leave. Otherwise, I'll be forced to kill you. The gang didn't take the hint and continued to advance. Naruto scowled and muttered about a waste of good ammo, then looked to his shadow clones. By ranks, from the front, volley, fire. The first rank fired as one, followed by the second rank, the third, and the fourth, creating a continuous wave of lead that mowed down the thugs like winter wheat. The survivors of the murderous fire broke and ran, disappearing out of sight as fast as their legs would carry them. It took 3 days for Sasuke to fully recover from Haku's Senbon. In that time, Naruto took Zabuza and Haku's bodies, and buried them in the same clearing he had buried the Taki Nin, Mori. Naruto drove Zabuza's Zanbeitu into the ground between the 2 graves as a marker, and hung the Mist Hittite and Hunter Nin mask from it. Naruto had, upon much thought, decided to cash in the bounty on Zabuza, and thus had mailed the demon of the mist scalp back to Kurigakure along with a return address in Konoha. Naruto then scoured every shop in Wave for a fitting gift to give Tenten. Ever since Getu's defeat, merchants had poured into Wave like locusts to a crop. He found the gift in a tiny shop, tucked into a blind alley 3 blocks off the main street. The vendor's sign advertised, foreign and exotic weapons, so Naruto, remembering how Tenten's eyes had lit up around any sort of armament, stepped inside. The interior of the shop was dusty and smelled of leather and honing oil. Seeing no one about, Naruto stepped to the counter, moving around a hogshead filled with arrows and ducking between two racks of yari. Naruto rang the bell on the counter. The proprietor, an old man whose ash-white hair still bore faint traces of brown, stepped out of a back room. "How can I help you? It's not often that someone comes into my shop. I'm looking for a weapon." The man laughed. "Of course you are. Why else would you step into a weapons shop? What kind do you need?" Naruto drew his peacemaker and laid it on the counter. "Do you have anything similar to this?" The old man's eyes grew wide. "I've not seen a weapon like that in a long time. I may have something, though. Let me check in the back room." And with that, the old shopkeeper vanished back into the other room. He emerged a few minutes later, a dusty wooden case tucked under one arm. "See if you like this." He laid the case upon the counter and opened it, spinning it to where Naruto could see the contents. Inside lay a single Colt Peacemaker, a 4-inch barrel sheriff's model. The grips were of beautifully stained cherry, engraved and inlaid with steel, polished mirror bright, in an ivy leaf design. The frame, barrel, and cylinder were case hardened, complementing the grips. "It's beautiful," said Naruto in awe as he picked the pistol up and idly twirled it, testing the balance. "Custom ordered by a customer a few years back as a gift. Fellow never returned for his order, so I kept it in back in case someone ever wanted it. It's yours for the right price." Naruto asked the price and the shopkeeper quoted him one. It was far beyond what Naruto had on hand for cash. Naruto uncased the Ferguson slung across his back. "I don't have the money, but would you take another weapon in trade?" Naruto pulled the Ferguson out of its case. The stock had been polished, the action oiled, and all the rust removed. "Ferguson rifle." The old man nodded, took the rifle and case, and then reached behind his back and drew a pair of tomahawks. "A rifle for a pistol is hardly fair, so take these 2 tomahawks of mine as boot to go with the pistol." Naruto smiled and nodded before sliding the axes into his belt and sealing the case into a scroll. As Naruto walked out the door, he gazed up at the sign above the shop's door, and its simple, J.W. Harden, weapons foreign and exotic, and smiled. The trek back to Konoha was short and uneventful. As they bedded down the first night, Naruto made another pot of coffee and took a cup to Sakura, who was on first watch. Eventful mission, Sakura. It was. "Naruto, did you ever find a gift for that girl you said you liked?" "I did. I hope she likes it." Sakura looked over to Naruto, and watched as he sipped from his cup of coffee. She'd come to realize that Naruto wasn't as one-dimensional as she'd thought he was. Sure, he was a prankster, and annoying at times, but he was also caring, and honest, and loyal. He'd had so few friends in his life that the ones he had, he treasured deeply. "Naruto, I don't think you're annoying anymore. I wish you the best of luck with your girl." Sakura, deciding to fill what could have been an awkward silence, changed the subject. "So, Naruto, do you have any hobbies? Aside from your guns, and pranks, I mean." Naruto smirked a little. "I play guitar. James taught me. Said it was good to have a hobby, and that music helped to keep my hands nimble." James played cards to do the same thing. Sakura was intrigued. "Can I hear you play?" Naruto dug a scroll out of his pack, unsealed his worn flat top, and quickly tuned it. "This song's called Star of the County Down." He started to play, and then sang. "Near Bembridge Town, in the County Down, one morning last July, down a Bothran Green, came a sweet Colleen, and she smiled as she passed me by. She looked so sweet from her 2 bare feet to the sheen of her nut brown hair. Such a coaxing elf, I'd to shake myself, to be sure I was really there. From Bantry Bay up to Derry Quay, from Galway to Dublin town. No maid I've seen like the brown Colleen that I met in the County Down." As she onward sped, I scratched my head, and I looked with a feeling rare. And I said, says I, to a passer-by, "Who's the maid with the nut brown hair?" He smiled at me, and with pride says he, "She's the gem of Ireland's crown. She's young Rosie McCann, From the banks of the Ban. She's the star of the county down. From Bantry Bay up to Derry Quay. From Galway to Dublin town. No maid I've seen like the brown Colleen. That I met in the county down. At the harvest fair. She'll surely be there. So I'll dress in my Sunday clothes. With my shoes shine bright. And my hat cocked right. For a kiss from the nut brown rose. No pipe I'll smoke. Nor horse I'll yoke. Till my plough with rust turns brown. Till a smiling bride, by my own fireside, sits the star of the county down. From Bantry Bay up to Derry Quay. From Galway to Dublin town. No maid I've seen like the brown Colleen. That I met in the county down. Naruto finished the song and looked at Sakura. She was smiling, and let out a chuckle. It was really good, Naruto. Naruto sealed his guitar away, and noticed the scroll he'd sealed when he was in the cave in Wave. He unsealed it and looked at it. It was large, leather-bound, and looked like it was very old. Naruto opened it and started to read. The scroll detailed how it was a pact and contract with one of the three beasts of the foot, though it never said what that was. Sakura, can you help me figure out what this scroll is? I found it in Wave, and just remembered it. Sakura looked at the scroll in curiosity. It looks like a summoning contract, though I don't know what a beast of the foot is. But they say that summons are sometimes a little eccentric. I heard once that Manda, the boss of the snake summons, demands human sacrifices from his summoners. Well, sign it, and we can try to summon it tomorrow. Naruto read the instructions on how to sign the contract, and duly pricked his finger before writing his name in blood and sealing it with a handprint. He reread the scroll, trying to decipher which creature he'd just bound himself to, and all he saw for a clue was a word he thought he remembered, in a foreign language he thought he'd heard once. Caballo. The next day, Naruto went to Kakashi and explained about the summoning contract, and how he'd like to try and summon one of these mysterious beasts of the foot, before they got back to Konoha. Kakashi, struck by curiosity, swiftly agreed and taught Naruto the hand seals for the summoning jutsu, and then found a large clearing. Naruto bit his thumb, and poured every ounce of his chakra into the jutsu. In a huge flash of smoke there appeared a coal-black, red-eyed, only slightly larger than normal, horse. Horses. I signed the contract for horses. The stallion glared at Naruto before speaking. Don't sound too enthusiastic, kid. The stallion's voice carried a drawling accent similar to James's, but slightly different. Naruto caught himself as he was about to make a smart-ass remark in kind. You're the boss of the horses. I expected, Naruto gestured grandly with his hands, indicating a much larger size. The horse snorted. I'm not the boss. I'm one of the under-bosses. And trust me, size ain't everything. As if to prove his words, the horse reared, pawing at the air so fast that his hooves were blurs. Then he bucked, so high that Naruto could see the tops of trees beneath his hooves. Every summon has its own little way of testing a new summoner. Your test for the horses is simple. You have to ride me. 8 seconds, one-handed, no chakra, tools, or anything else but your own strength and cussedness. You do that, we'll recognize you as our summoner, and I'll tell you my name. Naruto whooped and vaulted onto the horse's back, everyone watching. Naruto threw his left hand out behind him and grabbed a handful of mane with his right. The horse quit the earth. He ducked his head and blew straight up in air like he'd been launched. He kicked and crow-hopped. He bucked and rolled his belly in the air as if he were banking into turns. He jumped high and dove sharp for the ground, landing nearly vertical. All the while Naruto, grinning like a madman, held on for dear life. When the horse finally came to a standstill, Naruto had to force his hand to release its death grip on the creature's mane, and slid limply off one side to land on the ground. Naruto rolled to his hands and knees, and was promptly sick. I did it, he croaked between dry heaves. The horse chuckled. So you did, kid. Name's Widowmaker. If you're ever up for another go-round, you know where to find me. And with that, The stallion disappeared. Naruto's face suddenly lit up as if in recognition, and he let out a peal of laughter. I just realized where I saw that word, caballo, before. It's Spanish. It means horse. Sakura and Sasuke both looked confused, and Kakashi just shrugged and walked away. Spanish? Asked Sakura. Naruto smiled. It's a language spoken very far to the west of here. James used to speak a little of it, and I speak even less. Naruto let out another chuckle and shouldered his warbag and pack again, and set back off down the trail to Konoha. Sakura and Sasuke stood confused for a moment before following. Tenten was running laps around Konoha's wall with Lee and Neji, her teammates, when she heard 3 cracks in the distance that she instantly recognized as Naruto's Schofield. Naruto-kun's back. And it sounds like he's in trouble. Wait a minute, when did I start calling him Naruto-kun? She raced off without explanation to either of her teammates, beelining for the gate and preparing to defend her fellow ninja. The sight that greeted her was Naruto running for the gate, ahead of his team, who all looked like they were embarrassed to be associated with him. Tenten found herself smiling. She called out to the blonde from atop the wall. Naruto. Naruto heard Tenten's shout and looked up. Tenten. He sprinted ahead again, stopping only for the overworked Chunin at the gate to check his ID. He and Tenten were talking when Sasuke and Sakura walked up. Oh, hey, guys. Let me introduce everyone. Tenten-chan. These are my teammates, Uchiha Sasuke, and Haruno Sakura. Guys, this is Ikegata Tenten. No one noticed the look of realization swiftly cross Sakura's face, and the sly wink she gave Naruto. So, guys, any word to pass before I go and do my thing? Sakura and Sasuke both shrugged, which was their way of saying, nothing out of the ordinary, show up at the usual place at the usual time. They both left. Naruto turned back to Tenten. Say, Tenten-chan, you want to get something to eat? I'm about sick of my own cooking, to tell the truth. Naruto's stomach rumbled loudly right then, and Tenten laughed at his embarrassment. Come on, Naruto, let's feed you before you try to eat a bush or some stray Inuzuka dog or something. Tenten was joking with Naruto, but inside she was laughing, as 2 very similar thoughts ran through their heads. When did I start calling her Tenten-chan? When did he start calling me Tenten-chan? As the 2 pondered their similar questions, they soon found themselves outside Ichiraku's. Naruto and Tenten sat down and ordered their ramen, and Naruto started describing the high points of his mission, and then listened as Tenten told of her and her team's training. It seemed to Naruto that her sensei, Guy, was a fitness buff beyond belief. Their conversation continued after they paid their tab and left, walking casually throughout Konoha. Tenten gasped when Naruto told her about Inari playing Russian roulette, but sighed with relief when Naruto explained, and even demonstrated, how he'd switched the live round with an expended cartridge case. Finally, they came to a clearing in the forest, an old training ground, long unused by the look of it. Naruto reached into his bag and pulled out his storage scroll. He unsealed the case containing Tenten's pistol and slid it behind his back. Tenten-chan, I've got a confession to make. Tenten paused in mid-step. Yes, Naruto. Tenten's heart started to flutter. Tenten, I've got to tell you, I've seen a few girls, and honestly, none of them ever caught my eye like you. I'd be honored if you'd be my girlfriend. This last part came out as a question due to Naruto's nervousness. Tenten's face lit up. I'd be delighted, Naruto-kun. She walked over and proved her point by kissing him then and there. When they came up for air, Naruto reached next to the tree he was leaned against and pulled up the case. I got you a gift in Wave. I kinda figured you weren't the flowers and candy type, so I had to look a little to find it. He held the case out to Tenten, and she opened it. How her face had lit up earlier when Naruto had asked her to be his girlfriend, was nothing compared to the utter kid in a candy store look on her face when she lovingly picked the peacemaker up out of the case. Naruto-kun, you got me a weapon like yours, she cooed as she kissed him again. That one's a sheriff's model, so the barrel is 3 inches shorter than my cavalry model. I just saw the wood and the steel it was inlaid with, and thought it would be perfect for a girl who wants to master every weapon she can. I hope you like it, Tenten-chan. I love it, Naruto-kun. The rest of their evening was spent talking and cuddling, throwing Naruto's tomahawks and bowie, and practicing with their pistols. Naruto finally bid Tenten a fond adieu, and left her with an invitation to go hunting with him sometime and directions to his apartment. The next morning, Tenten skipped down the stairs to breakfast. Her father was stunned. His daughter was by no means a morning person. You're looking cheerful this morning, Tenten. Tenten just smiled, remembering her evening with Naruto. It's a sunny day, the birds are singing, what's not to be cheerful about, Dad? Her dad chuckled and wished Tenten good luck with her day as she went out the door. Lee and Neji were waiting when she arrived at their meeting place. Good morning, Lee, Neji. Good morning, Tenten. Your flames of youth are burning very brightly today, spoke Lee. Neji nodded an acknowledgement of her greeting and went back to bird watching. Tenten leaned against her favorite target tree and pulled her revolver out of her waistband. She held it lovingly, admiring the way that the light played off the grips and the steel ivy leaves inlaid into them. So beautiful, yet so deadly at the same time. What's that, Tenten? Asked Lee as he did his 5th set of push-ups for the day. It was odd that Guy-sensei hadn't arrived yet. He was usually the first person to greet Tenten in the morning. It's a new weapon, a Colt single-action army revolver, or Peacemaker, for short. It's a gift from my boyfriend. This stopped Lee in mid-push-up, and jerked Neji's attention from the nest of finches he'd been watching. Boyfriend? They both asked in unison. Yes, a boyfriend. He asked me out last night. Who is this most youthful young man, Tenten? Asked Lee inquisitively. Neji looked on in mild curiosity. Uzumaki Naruto Hickok, the shootist. Tenten beamed as she said this. Neji snorted and went back to watching birds, and Lee challenged Tenten to spar with him. As they squared off, their sensei, Maeda Guy, arrived in a swirl of leaves. He explained that the team had the rest of the week off from work, to prepare for the upcoming Chunin exams. He stressed that they still train, but that they were excused from missions. With that, he dismissed them. Tenten ran back to her house to grab a few things. She planned to take Naruto up on his invitation to hunt with him. Naruto was strolling down the street, pondering why it was that Kakashi-sensei felt that his team was ready for the Chunin exams when they'd been a team barely a month. All thoughts were dashed from his head as he passed an alleyway only to be grabbed from behind, spun around, and then forcibly thrown against a wall. In front of him stood a boy in a horrible green spandex jumpsuit, with huge eyebrows and a bowl haircut. Uzumaki Naruto Hickok. I'm a friend of Ikeda Tenten's, and I would like to give you a word of friendly advice. Her flames of youth are bright, and shine even brighter when she thinks of you. He held up a brick in front of Naruto's face. Should you ever be the cause for her flames of youth to dim or go out, there will be dire consequences. With that, Lee crushed the brick in his hand to powder. He let Naruto go, and started to walk away. Naruto stopped him. You needn't worry about that, Lee, the shootist said. Tenten told me about you and Neji. That's how I know who you are. I promise you I'll never hurt her. You have my word on that. Naruto walked out of the alley and back to his apartment. Tenten was waiting at the foot of the stairs when Naruto walked up. Hi, Naruto-kun, she chirped. Guy-sensei gave us the rest of the week off to prep for the Chunin exams, and I thought I'd take you up on that offer to go hunting. Are you free? Naruto smiled and nodded. I'm free, Tenten-chan. Kakashi-sensei put my team up for the exams, too. He did like yours did and gave us the rest of the week. Come on inside, and we'll get ready to hunt. They made their way up to Naruto's apartment and stepped inside. Naruto rooted around until he found the scroll with his other weapons in it, and laid it out on his bed. You can use my Henry, Tenten-chan. I've got another rifle I can use. You have your peacemaker, right? At her nod, Naruto unsealed his Spencer and handed the Henry to Tenten. Naruto quickly loaded the Spencer and dropped a couple of extra boxes of ammunition for it and his other guns into his warbag. The two set out, Naruto carrying his Spencer, his Schofield, and his shotgun, while Tenten had the Henry, her peacemaker tucked into a pocket. When the two arrived in the forest, Naruto started looking for game sign. After a while, he found a deer trail, and started following the tracks of what looked to be a fairly good-sized buck. All the while, Tenten followed him, the Henry ready. They soon lost the trail in a creek, but Naruto kept searching for sign, finding boar tracks. They followed the trail for a quarter mile, then Naruto gestured for Tenten to freeze. There in front of them was the boar, a massive beast with double tusks. Okay, Tenten-chan, you want this one, or do I take him? Whispered Naruto quietly as they watched the pig rooting at the base of a tree. I'll take him, Naruto. He's quartering away, so aim about an inch or so behind his front leg. Tenten eased the rifle to her shoulder, thumbed back the hammer, and took aim. Her shot struck cleanly, piercing the boar's right lung and heart. The boar dropped where he stood. Naruto cocked the Spencer and moved forward. Boars were tricky. Sometimes a hunter only thought the boar was dead, and paid the price for it. But the pig was dead, and Naruto rapidly drew his knife and began skinning it. Good shot, Tenten-chan. You drilled him clean. Naruto quickly finished skinning and gutting, and expertly quartered up the carcass and sealed it in a scroll to keep it fresh. Let's keep hunting and see if we can get something to fill my pantry. They set out again. They flushed a brace of pheasants, which Naruto potted with his shotgun, and then jumped up a deer. The buck took off running, only to be taken squarely by a shot from Naruto's Spencer. As Naruto cleaned his deer, Tenten twirled her peacemaker, the dying sunlight flashing off of the inlay. Naruto found himself distracted from the buck by the beauty of Tenten as she made her pistol dance. Naruto quickly forced himself to focus on the deer, and got it skinned and quartered, and sealed all into his scroll. Let's head back, Tenten-chan. I've got all the meat I need. If you want, you can stay for supper at my place. I was planning on some venison stew and biscuits. Tenten smiled. I'd love to, Naruto-kun. She kissed his cheek and they started walking back to the village. They returned to Naruto's apartment, and while Naruto got the ingredients together for his stew, Tenten sat on the edge of his bed and, under Naruto's watchful eye, cleaned her revolver, and the Henry she'd used to hunt. Naruto had originally said that he'd clean all the weapons later that evening, but Tenten insisted that she'd at least clean the Henry, because she was the one who'd used it. Naruto whistled a tune as he cut up the venison for the stew, and then chopped up what vegetables he had that weren't bad and added them. He delved into the deepest recesses of his refrigerator and came out with a bottle of hot sauce, and added a dash of it along with some other seasonings. As the stew simmered, he mixed the dough for his biscuits and started his oven heating. Then he turned to Tenten and smiled. Hey, Tenten-chan, did you know that I play guitar? He pulled out his guitar and leaned against the wall. He strummed a few chords and then looked at Tenten. She was smiling. Play something, Naruto-kun. Naruto played, Tying Knots in the Devil's Tail. Tenten laughed as he started singing the lyrics. Now way up high, in the Sierra Peaks, where the yellow jack pines grow tall. Ol' Sandy Bob and Buster Jiggs had a round-up camp last fall. Well, they taken their horses, and the runnin' iron, and mebbe a dog or two, and they swore they'd brand all the long-eared calves that came within their view, and any old dogie that flapped long ears, and didn't bush up by day, got his long ears whittled and his old hide scorched, in a most artistic way. One fine day ol' Sandy Bob, he throwed his Ciego down. I'm sick of the smell of this burnin' hair. And I, lows I'm goin' to town. So they saddles up, and they hits him a lope, for it weren't no side of a ride. And them was the days when a buckaroo could oil up his insides. They starts her off at the Kentucky bar, at the head of Whiskey Row, and they ends up down by the depot house, some 40 drinks below. Then sets up and turns around, and goes her the other way. And to tell you the godforsaken truth, them boys got stewed that day, as they was a ridin' back to camp, packin' a pretty good load. Who should they meet but the devil himself, a prancin' down the road. Says he, "You ornery cowboy skunks, you'd better hunt her holes, for I've come up from hell's rim rock to gather in your souls." Ol' Sandy Bob says, "Devil be damned. We boys is kinda tight, but you ain't gonna get no cowboy souls without one helluva fight." So Sandy Bob punched a hole in his rope, and he swang her straight and true. He lapped onto the devil's horns, and he taken his dallies too. Now Buster Jiggs was a riata man, with his gut line coiled up neat. He shakes her out, and built him a loop, and he lassoed up the devil's hind feet. They stretched him out, and they tailed him down. While the irons was gettin' hot, they cropped and swallow forked both his ears, and they branded him up a lot. They pruned him up with a dehorning saw, and knotted his tail for a joke. Then rode off and left him there, neck to a blackjack oak. So if you're ever up high in the Sierra Peaks, and you hear one hell of a wail, why, you'll know it's the devil, a bellerin' about, the knots tied in his tail. Naruto ended the song, and looked to Tenten, who was doubled over laughing at the ridiculous lyrics. Naruto laughed and put his biscuits in the oven to bake. He sat down next to Tenten and hugged her. "How do you do it, Naruto?" "Do what, Tenten? How do you stay so happy, so cheerful? I've seen how most people treat you. I'd be a sobbing wreck by now if I were in your position." Tenten was genuinely sad for Naruto. People treated him like scum no matter where he went. She wasn't sure she'd have been able to survive it, much less thrive like Naruto seemed to have done. And she surely wouldn't be smiling all the time. Naruto shrugged. "They don't know me. Not really. So I just write most folks off as fools and go on. Because if I listened to them, I'd never be able to reach my goals. I will become Hokage someday, and then they'll have to acknowledge me." Naruto pulled his t-shirt over his head and turned, revealing a tattoo across his upper back. It was a supple, fluid script that read, "Prefiero morir de pie, que vivir siempre de avrodeado." Tenten was confused. What does it mean? I've never seen a language like it. Naruto put his shirt back on and turned to face her. "It's the only whole phrase I know of a language from way west of here called Spanish. It's my reminder not to give in for anything. It means, I'd rather die on my feet, than live forever on my knees." Tenten's eyes had begun to tear as she listened to Naruto explain why he never gave up, and always kept going. He acted like he didn't care, but Naruto's eyes were more expressive than any other part of him, and she could see the sadness hidden by the fool's mask he put on. She wrapped him up in a warm hug. "Naruto-kun, if no one else believes in you, I do. You'll do great things, Naruto-kun, I can feel it." Naruto nearly cried when she said that. "Thank you, Tenten-chan." He stood and went to his oven to check his biscuits. They were done, so he pulled them out and washed 2 bowls before ladling the stew out into them. "Come and get it, Tenten-chan. It isn't 5-star, but it'll fill the hollow spot." Tenten tried a bite of the stew and declared it good, and she and Naruto sat and ate, talking of random things between bites. They talked of the weather, and the exams, and their dreams, Naruto to become Hokage, and his goal of avenging James, while Tenten told of how she wanted to become as strong as her idol, Lady Tsunade of the Sannin. But soon the hour grew late, and Tenten took her leave of Naruto, politely declining his offer to walk her home or let her stay the night at his apartment. "Good night, Naruto-kun." "Good night, Tenten-chan." That night, as Naruto lay sleeping, he dreamed. He suddenly found himself in a dark sewer, unarmed. "Where am I?" He looked around, finding no sign or signal that might lead him out. Looking up, he saw pipes on the ceiling, blue and red, running in both directions down the passageway. Pipes gotta lead somewhere, he mused to himself, and started following them. They branched out down side corridors periodically, but Naruto kept following the main trunk lines, until he exited into a colossal vaulted chamber. Before him stood a towering wall of bars, dividing the chamber Naruto stood in from another of equal size. Hanging from a door set into the bars was a slip of paper, with but one word on it. Seal. Read Naruto out loud. He stepped back in surprise and fear when a deep voice echoed from within the other chamber. Who awakens the Kyuubi no Kitsune? Within the cage the great demon opened one red eye, as big as a millwheel. So, the jailer finally deigns to meet his charge. What brings you into the recesses of your mind? I don't know how I got here. Wait, we're in my mind. God, this place looks like hell, mused Naruto as he took in the squalor of his surroundings. It suddenly hit him who he was talking to. Wait a damned minute. You're the Kyuubi no Kitsune. The demon laughed at his jailer's reaction. Yes, I am the Kyuubi no Kitsune. And, Gaki, it is your mind. You could change it if you wanted. As is, you dump all your negative emotions here, so your mindscape changes to reflect that. You're the one responsible for the pitiful state of my jail. Naruto gaped at the huge eye, and the hulking form he saw connected to it. If you've been here since the day I was born, how come I never heard you or talked to you before now? The seal was too strong. When you lost Hickok, it weakened. When you thought you lost the Uchiha, it finally cracked enough for me to contact you. And I'd like to say this much, Gaki. Though it may be the most often overused ploy of prisoners everywhere, I tell you now, and swear it on each of my tales, that I was set up. My mate, my kits. All of them were slain while I was away. The only evidence was a Konoha hit I ate and a glimpse of a shinobi who smelled like snakes with blood on his sword. I don't ask freedom, I ask only that you understand, Kit, and that you don't have the seal tightened again. Naruto nodded gravely. I can't say I believe you yet, Kyuubi-san. But I'll give you the benefit of the doubt for now. Don't make me regret it. Naruto then visualized, focused and concentrated, and the rancid sewer of his mind was replaced with a deep forest and glade, the bars of the seal replaced by an iron collar with the seal upon it around the fox's neck. A little freedom. Even prisoners on death row get a little yard time. Naruto walked out of a convenient door and awoke to the sunrise. But as he left, he caught the slightest hint of gratitude from his tenant. Naruto and Team 7 met outside the doors of the Ninja Academy the following Monday. Naruto was outfitted with all his guns, the ones not in use sealed into a storage scroll with extra ammunition and extra supplies. He didn't know what was in store, but he'd be damned if he was going into it underprepared. They walked in, and up the stairs. There in front of door 301, their intended destination, was a crowd of genin. He could hear Tenten ahead talking to someone. She told him about her team's plan to act weak, and not display their true talents. There in front of the door stood a pair of teens, as if guarding it, prattling on about how they'd failed the test 3 times, and the responsibilities of Chunin. Gaki, those two are using henge, and there's a genjutsu in the air, spoke the Kyuubi in Naruto's mind. Naruto almost visibly flinched at being startled like that. He'd gotten used to the idea of the fox talking to him via the link in his mind, but it still startled him to hear from Kyuubi out of the blue like that. Please, just let us through, begged Tenten just before the larger of the two people guarding the door backhanded her across the face. As he drew back to strike again, he found himself slammed to the ground, Naruto sitting astride his chest. He gagged as the grip Naruto had on his throat tightened. Naruto snarled, throwing off so much unintentional killing intent that weaker-willed genin in the crowd nearly fouled themselves. I swear, Azumo, if you hit her again, I'll kill you, hissed the blonde genin. Azumo nodded as best he could, as his face rapidly shifted shades from red to an ugly maroon color as more and more oxygen was kept from his brain. Naruto let go and stood, then helped Tenten up from where she'd landed. Sakura, Sasuke, come on. Tenten-chan, please bring your team. This isn't where we need to be. Team 7 and Guy followed the boy, all but Neji and Sasuke looking confused. Naruto stopped by a seemingly blank section of wall, and then turned. You okay, Ten-chan? Tenten nodded, brushing a stray fleck of blood from her lip where it had split on her teeth. But why are we here? The door's back there, isn't it? Sasuke snorted. No, it's not. I can't believe the Dobi actually saw through the genjutsu. We're still on the second floor. Naruto smirked and flipped Sasuke the bird. Course I did, Tem. It was as obvious as your ego. Naruto pointed toward the wall behind him. Stairs are through there. He then left through the genjutsu and went upstairs. The others joined him in a moment. Let's go, guys. We're almost there. Up ahead stood a door. They were stopped by Lee. The bushy-browed fighter spoke to Sasuke. Uchiha, before we go in, I'd like you to fight me. Sasuke smirked, while Naruto and Tenten groaned. Well, Tenten groaned. Naruto disguised his chuckle as a groan. As the two squared off, Naruto turned to Sakura. Sakura, I'll bet you 35 Ryu that Sasuke loses in less than 2 minutes and never gets hit by a single ninjutsu or genjutsu. Sakura was appalled. Naruto, how could you say that? Of course Sasuke won't get hit, but he'll win. I'll guarantee it. You're on. Tenten chuckled at the exchange between Naruto and his teammate. Naruto had listened to her talk about her team, and so he knew all about Lee and Neji. Naruto stepped out between the two fighters and raised a hand, the other holding a watch. Begin. The two came together in a blurred rush, then ricocheted off one another, only to rebound and strike again and again. Sasuke activated his Sharingan, and realized why he was having trouble with Lee. Speed Demon, Sasuke caught Lee's arms in the next rush, and began to grapple, only to find himself overmatched in strength as well as speed. Naruto smirked as he watched, and Sakura was flabbergasted at the sight of her beloved Sasuke-kun getting beaten to within an inch of his life. How is he beating Sasuke? Naruto leaned in and spoke. The Sharingan improves your reaction time mentally. Sasuke can probably see every blow coming in. But the Sharingan doesn't improve your reaction physically. Truth is, Sasuke can see them, but he's too slow to block or dodge. Lee's a taijutsu freak. It's his thing. You see, Sakura, in Lee's opinion, there's two kind of people. There's geniuses by birth, like Sasuke Tem or Hyuga Neji, who have bloodlines that make them insanely powerful. And then there's folks like Lee, who had to work their asses off every minute of every day, just get marginally powerful. Lee is physically unable to mold chakra at all. He can't use ninjutsu or genjutsu. So he trains himself insanely every day to become so good at taijutsu that it makes up for his lack of chakra molding. That's all Lee, all muscle, all determination. Lee's what they call a genius of hard work. Oh, here comes the finisher. They all turned in time to see Lee kick Sasuke in the chin, launching the red-eyed boy into the air, where Lee was suddenly right below him, in his shadow. Lee's bandages unraveled and started to wrap Sasuke. Tenten saw this and panicked. Naruto-kun, stop him. Don't let him use it. Naruto reacted out of instinct and whipped a tomahawk through the air, neatly clipping through one of Lee's bandages, just as the other was pinned to the wall by a pinwheel. Lee landed, and Sasuke landed nearby, unconscious. Naruto checked his watch. Minute and a half, Sakura. He never once took a hit from nin or genjutsu, and he's obviously the loser. Sakura was ignoring Naruto, instead opting to try and care for Sasuke. Naruto watched as Guy, Lee and Tenten-sensei, appeared and scolded Lee for almost revealing his technique. Naruto turned to Tenten and kissed her cheek, then went to collect his team and go on to the next room. As Team 7 entered the short corridor leading to the next room, they saw Kakashi ahead. Congrats, team. You're all here, so now you can take the exam. I lied about the application being individual decision. I didn't want you to bully your teammates into taking the exam. But you're here, so go on and do me proud. He stepped out of the way and Team 7 entered the room. Room 301 was packed with ninja, representing every hidden village. Near the door, Team 7 took stock of their competition. Naruto looked around and spotted the other members of the Rookie 9, Teams 8 and 10. A willowy blonde girl, Yamanaka Ino of Team 10, detached herself from the group and made her way over to where Sasuke stood. She wrapped herself around the Uchiha, and proceeded to use every feminine while she had on him. Her advances were not returned. This was not taken well by Sakura. Get off him, Ino pig. Sakura snarled ferally at Ino. He's not yours, billboard brow, snapped the blonde in return, unwinding herself from around Sasuke. And besides, everyone knows that men prefer blondes. Sakura prepared to beat the hell out of her rival, when they were interrupted by a silver-haired Konoha genin. You might not want to start anything here. The folks here are all on edge, especially those guys. He pointed to a group of ninja from Hidden Rain, who all bore the same expression of barely contained frustration and anger. I'm Kabuto. You all look like you're fresh out of the academy. Let me give you some advice. Naruto tuned the boy out and ignored him, preferring to sit back and hone his tomahawks and bowie knife. Naruto caught motion out of the corner of his eye and looked up just in time to see a bandaged genin with an 8-note on his headband swing and miss Kabuto's face. Kabuto suddenly doubled over and puked, his glasses cracked. How did he do that? He missed cleanly. From the front of the room came a bang as multiple people appeared suddenly. The largest, a scar-faced Konoha ninja in a black trench coat yelled. All right, you miserable whelps. Quiet down or I'll disqualify all of you. My name is Morino Ibiki, and I'm the examiner for the first portion of the Chunin selection exams. From here on out you play by my rules. First is there will be no fighting unless I allow it, and even then, you will not be allowed to use lethal force. Now, your current seating arrangement is bad, so everyone will file up to the front, take a number, and go to the seat that matches your number. Once everyone's seated, we'll begin the written portion of the exam. A paper test. Oh, shit, I suck at paper tests. Naruto nearly panicked when he heard the proctor's announcement. He took his number and sat down. Kyuubi-san, can you help me with this test? Please. I can help you with this test, Yaki. I've been around for a long time, and there is not much that I do not know. Ibiki spoke again. The rules for the written exam are simple. I'm not going to repeat myself, so listen closely. Each genin starts out with 10 points. There are 10 questions on this test, and each wrong answer subtracts a point from that genin's score. The teams with the highest scores will move on to the second portion of the exams. Further, we will subtract 2 points for every time we catch you cheating. Naruto was almost calmed at this point. He was sure that Sakura and Sasuke would score well on the test. All he had to do was try not to make too many mistakes. Ibiki went on. Oh, and one more thing. If you lose all 10 points, not only do you fail, but your entire team fails as well. You have 1 hour to complete the test. Begin. Kyuubi-san, are you sure you can help me? I will help you, Yaki. I'm sure I know whatever's on that paper. Naruto turned over his paper and looked at the questions. Kyuubi's reaction was less than inspiring. I don't know that stuff. I'm sorry I can't help you with the answers, but maybe we can pick up the answers another way. Naruto could almost feel the fox smiling mischievously. And how do you propose we do that? If we get caught cheating, then it's the end for all of us. Precisely, Kit. If we get caught cheating, just let me have control of your ears for a second, and I'll have the answers for you. Naruto gave the fox the benefit of the doubt, and relinquished control of his ears. In a moment, Kyuubi spoke again in his mind, relaying the answers from where Akamaru, the ninja dog of Konoha Team 8's Inuzuka Kiba, was relaying them to his master. Naruto wrote the answers down and waited. The exam paper said that the 10th question would be an oral question, given 15 minutes prior to the end of the test. 45 minutes passed, and Ibiki once more spoke. Several teams had gotten sloppy, and been ejected, but many teams still remained. Ibiki spoke. Now for the 10th question. Before we give the question, I have to explain the rules of desperation. First, you must choose whether or not to take the question. If you decline the question, you immediately fail, and your team along with you. He quickly silenced several voices from the crowd and continued. But, if you choose to take the question, and answer incorrectly, that person will be permanently ineligible for the Chunin exams. You won't be able to take the test ever again. A blonde girl from Hidden Sand stood. What do you mean, permanently ineligible? There are people here who've taken the exams before. Ibiki glared at her. Those other times, they didn't have me as a proctor. Now I'm in charge, and it's my rules. So, if you decline to take the question, raise your hand, give your name, and then take your team and leave. Several genin raised their hands, and were duly escorted out with their teams. Naruto started to raise his hand, then abruptly slammed it down on the desk in front of him. He was on his feet, a fierce look on his face. You think you can scare me with that? It doesn't matter if I stay a genin for the rest of my days. I'll still become Hokage. I never back down. It's my nindo, my ninja way. And it's my way of the shootist. I will attain my goals, no matter what. Come hell or high water, I will. The others in the room heard Naruto's outburst, and took heart from his speech. No more hands went up. Ibiki looked out over the crowd. Inspiring. Very inspiring. All those who have remained, you pass. There was really no 10th question beyond the take or leave part. He went on to explain the sometimes necessity of taking risks without knowledge of the consequences. To emphasize, he removed the black bandana over his head, to reveal the long slices, burns, and punctures of when he was tortured. Suddenly from the side of the room, a window exploded inward as a large black bundle crashed through. Out of the bundle came 4 kunai with ropes attached, which tugged the bundle open into a banner, which read, Second Exam Proctor, Mitarashi Anko, is now here. In front of the banner stood a lithe, athletically built woman with purple hair and feral eyes. She wore a form-fitting fishnet bodysuit, black skin-tight shorts, and a buff-colored trench coat. All right, you twerps, I'm the second examiner, Mitarashi Anko. She saw the crowd and looked to Ibiki. Ibiki looked right back. Don't you think you could have found a less expensive way to make an entrance? No. But damn, Ibiki, you're losing your touch. You left me with 12 teams. 36 genin. What can I say, Anko? There are a lot of good ones in the bunch this year. Well, we'll see if they've really got the stuff. I guarantee I'll cut this mob in half by the end of my phase. This pronouncement left several people shuddering in anxiety. Now, follow me. She took off swiftly, the genin in tow. This is it, ladies. Training Ground 44, affectionately known as the Forest of Death. The site of the second phase of the exam. Anko looked at the assembled crowd of genin and smiled. Naruto grinned his fox grin, and spun the cylinder of his peacemaker. Doesn't look too scary to me. Naruto saw Anko's hand flash, and felt his cheek stinging. Anko had thrown a kunai and nicked his face. Anko appeared behind him and leaned over his shoulder. It's the loud ones like you who die first, but I don't mind. Your blood tastes sweeter. She leaned in and licked the trickle of blood from the cut. Naruto turned and looked at her just as a genin from Kusagaker, the village of hidden grass, handed Anko back her kunai. Using his tongue, which was abnormally long, to say the least. Anko went on to explain the exercise, in which half of the teams would receive a scroll marked, Heaven, and the other half a scroll marked, Earth. The objective was to bring both scrolls to the tower in the center of the forest, within 5 days, and with all members more or less intact. Each team signed a waiver indemnifying Konoha against their possible, and highly likely death, and received their scroll. Naruto was the one from his team who received the scroll. He pulled it out of his pocket and looked at it, then remarked loudly, "Okay, we got a heaven scroll." Cool. This earned him a swat from Sakura and a glare from Sasuke. "Why did you do that, Naruto? Now everyone knows which scroll we have," yelled Sakura angrily, all the while rearing back for another strike. Naruto pulled his slouch hat off of his head, straightened the crown on it, and leaned close, pulling Sasuke in close with him. "Simple. We have a heaven. We need an earth. Other teams with a heaven don't need another, while teams with an earth need a heaven." Sasuke's eyes lit up. "So you just eliminated half of the competition, while baiting the half we need. Naruto, that was actually pretty smart. I only act like an idiot, Sasuke." At that moment the bell for the start of the exam rang, and the gates swung open. Teams rushed into the forest, and before long, screams echoed across the trees, as teams began to fall. Some to nature, some to each other. Team 7 made good time into the forest, and stopped to rest a moment. Naruto excused himself to go and relieve himself, returning in a moment or so. "Hey, guys, I'm back." His answer was a kunai whistling past his head, hurled by Sasuke. "Drop the henge." Naruto's right-handed, so his kunai holster is on his right leg, southpaw. "You're even worse at disguises than the Dobi." The imposter dropped the illusion, revealing himself as a rain ninja. He wordlessly charged, throwing kunai and shuriken as he came. He was interrupted mid-stride by a low whistling noise and a deep, wet thud. He froze, his eyes glazing over as he toppled to the ground. There behind him stood Naruto, his pants held up with one hand and the other still outstretched from throwing the tomahawk now embedded in the aim nin's skull. "He caught me with my pants down. Literally. I mean, who'd ambush a guy in the middle of taking a piss?" His rant was cut short by Sakura bashing him in the head and telling him to watch what he said around girls. Sasuke cut in. "We need a password. Something to identify each other so that doesn't happen again." Naruto came over after he finished looting the aim nin's corpse for weapons, gear, and valuables. He sealed the spoils into a scroll and slid it back into his warbag. The three crouched down and as Sasuke spoke, he also began to move his hands in what the others recognized as sign language. The challenge is, Asano. The response is Lord Asano's death poem. "I wish I had seen the end of spring, but I do not miss the falling of the cherry blossoms." At the same time he signed, "In case someone's listening to us right now, there's a second challenge and password. You guys have heard that new foreign song, Hair Trigger Colt .44 feet by Chris Ledoux." At the other two's nod, he continued. "Use a line from it in a sentence." "Got it." Both nodded. Naruto looked at Sasuke. "Hey, Tem, you mind doing me a favor?" "What's that, Dobi?" "That bushwhacking rain ninja is startin' to stink. You mind gettin' rid of him? I'll scout ahead and find a new campsite." Just as Naruto was about to stand up, a huge gust of wind whipped up from nowhere, blowing the blonde totally out of the clearing, and scattering the other two to opposite sides of the large clearing. Sasuke stood, drawing a kunai. Sakura came stumbling out of the brush. "Sasuke-kun, are you alright?" Sakura started toward him but was brought up short by Sasuke's shout. "Sakura, Asano, I'm an outlaw now, but I was a hero then." "Oh, right, I wish I had seen the end of spring, but I do not miss the falling of the cherry blossoms." She scowled at Sasuke and rubbed her forehead. "Lord, if I had only known the misery, that glory's something not worth killing for." She took her place at his side and they turned back to back, kunai out and ready. Meanwhile, Naruto had landed, only to be swallowed by a giant snake. "Damn it. This sucks. Do I look like Snake Chow to you?" Quote. He reached behind his back and pulled his Parker, then created 6 shadow clones. "Alright, boys, both barrels, on, fire." The 7 Narutos thumbed the rabbit ears back on their shotguns, and waited. "Ready, aim, say heartburn, mother F% and carrot fire." The 7 Narutos simultaneously unleashed 14 barrels of double-aught buckshot into an area of the snake's belly the size of a human being. This weakened the tissue enough for Naruto, upon dispersing his clones, to slice his way out of the snake with his bowie. Now to find Sasuke and Sakura. He followed the sound of conflict until he came upon his teammates, hunkered behind a tree, visibly shaken. They were so scared of whatever was out there that they failed to notice the huge viper that was slowly and silently gliding down from the tree behind them, fangs poised to strike. Naruto drew his Schofield and fired twice, killing the snake and startling the others. Naruto ran out of the bushes, and drew his peacemaker. I can't remember that damned poem, Sasuke Tem. But I do know that I'm a man that's gone to hell with heaven's blessing. What's going on? Sasuke's response was short and clipped as he looked around. Grass Nin, the one with the long tongue, tried to impersonate you, but whoever he is, he's way out of our league, Naruto. We've gotta run, maybe if we give him our scroll, he'll let us go. Won't work, Tem. You don't know for sure if he'll let us go, and besides, when were you, the high and mighty, last loyal Uchiha, ever scared of anything? I say we fight. Naruto's speech was cut short by the corpse of the snake he'd killed splitting open, to reveal the grass nin in question. The short one speaks the truth, Uchiha. Who is to say that the predator would let his prey go, even with such an appetizer? No, I'd think it best if the little mice died trying to fight. And with that, he lunged, and was then brought up short by a pistol ball from Naruto. The bullet tore through his chest, and the grass nin dissolved into mud. A Tsuchi Bunshin, a mud clone. Now, young one, no need to be too hasty. Perhaps you'd like to play with one of my pets, spoke the man as he appeared from the trees a few yards away. He bit his thumb, and swiped the blood down a tattoo on his arm. Kuchio's no jutsu. Another colossal serpent appeared, and made directly for Naruto. Naruto swiftly used Kawarimi to replace himself with a chunk of log, and fired his sharps directly into the beast's right eye, killing it and causing it to vanish in a great gout of smoke. Naruto bit his own thumb and performed the seals for his own summoning. I'll see you a summon, and raise you 2 more, snake bastard. Kuchio's no jutsu. In a flash and smoke appeared 3 mares, one a blue roan, another a strawberry roan, and the other, white as snow. Their saddle pads read, war, destruction, and death. The white spoke, in a low, hollow voice. Who calls upon the Morrigan? I called, said Naruto. I called you to deal with this snake bastard. The strawberry roan replied, ah, so you are the maelstrom that so impressed Widowmaker. I am Badby. My sisters are Nimane and Matcha. We 3 are the Morrigan. Unmatched in battle, saved by the boss, and the hero twins. We ask a price be paid of our service, though, young maelstrom. 1 bite each, of your flesh. Naruto gulped and held out his arm. The 3 horses each nipped his arm, drawing blood, but the wound swiftly healed. Now, to battle. They charged the stunned grass nin. Each fall of Badby's hooves threw sparks of fire, and the earth in her tracks was scorched black. Flames began to lick from her nostrils. Each strike of her hooves exploded in a burst of flame. Nimane reared and pawed, her hooves throwing off waves of chakra that sliced through tree and bush like razors through water. Matcha merely neighed, releasing a cloud of chakra that caused everything within a 100-meter radius to wither and die. Naruto quickly reloaded and shouted to his teammates. Now, while he's distracted. Let's get him. The 3 launched into battle alongside the horses. Sasuke darted among the horses, launching shuriken and kunai, and the odd kaiden jutsu. Sakura added her own kunai and shuriken to the fray, while Naruto and his numerous kage bunshins, fearing hitting Sakura or Sasuke, tied in with the bowie, darting and cutting. They backed the grass nin up against a tree, and Sasuke pinned him there with wire tied to several shuriken. Badby squared up on the grass ninja. Uchiha. Now, together, she shouted. Sasuke placed the wires into his mouth and began making hand signs. They both released their jutsu at the same time, a huge gout of fire from Badby, and Sasuke's Ruka no Jutsu, burning the man to a crisp. Or so they thought. They watched in horror as the man reached up, and peeled his face, or the grass ninja's face, off, revealing his true face, a thin, golden-eyed man. What a waste of a good disguise. You've found me out. I am Orochimaru. And with that the man slithered, literally slithered, out of the burned skin, and free of the wires. The Kyuubi was going wild inside Naruto's head, slamming against the bars of the seal and roaring to be set free. Let me out, whelp. It's him. It's the one who killed my mate and kits, the one who set me up. Let me free. Naruto was flooded with the Kyuubi's chakra. His nail lengthened into claws, and his eyes grew red and slitted once more. Naruto pounced at Orochimaru, tearing and clawing, only to be brought up short by a series of Tsuchi Bunshin. So, you are the one, hissed Orochimaru as he performed hand seals, each fingertip on his right hand covered with violet flames. Gogyo Fuin, he cried as he slammed his hand into Naruto's belly. The 5 elements seal overlaid the existing seals, and Naruto slumped into unconsciousness. Sasuke launched back into the fray, only to be pinned and bitten by the man. As Sasuke's world faded to black, he heard Orochimaru's voice. He seeks power, more than this place could ever give him. Rest assured, he'll seek me out.